microphones here? So does it really matter that you have your number? Oh, because she can, yeah. Okay. The little red lights. Are we ready, Denise, or are you still? Oh, you're good. Okay.
Hello.
Excuse the delay. We're just doing a little musical microphones up here. All right, we'll get started. Welcome, everybody. It is April 7th, 2025, and this is a work session of the Billings City Council. There's a copy of the agenda back by the door for anybody who would like one. We've got 6 items on our regular agenda this evening. For anybody who doesn't know, our work sessions are a little more informal than our regular business meetings. So we don't make decisions except to maybe give direction to staff. That's reserved for our regular business meetings, those kind of formal decisions. So we will jump into our meeting this evening. Before I open it up for public comment on any item, either on our agenda or off our agenda, I just want to offer my congratulations to our police department who whipped the fire department. But the chief's not here yet, so we'll have to reserve that, I guess, for the hockey game Saturday night. Chris, anything in the way of preliminaries before we open up for public comment?
I'll speak loudly. I do not have anything before we get rolling.
Very good, thank you. And just a reminder for members of the public, we do have a microphone when we open it for public comment, and we just ask that you speak directly into that mic. It is directional, so if you turn your head, you may not get picked up. Just try to keep your voice going directly into the microphone. So with that, we'll open it up to public comment on items either on our agendas tonight. If you want to comment on something that is on our agenda, you may want to wait until we actually get to that item because then there'll be a presentation. But if you've got to leave tonight early, feel free to comment at this time. But there will be a time for public comment on each of the items on our agenda when we get to those items. Or anything that's not on our agenda that's also fair game now or at the very end of our meeting. With that, former Councilmember Treaky, welcome. It's all yours. You know the routine. Please, 3 minutes and tell us your name and address.
Hi, am I on the record? My name is Danny Chiricky. I live in Ward 3, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about an ongoing topic that we've had, Main Street versus Wall Street, and in particular, Montana property tax. So why do economic elites love the cultural wars? Why do they attack and marginalize people, ban books, and police bathrooms? Why? Because it's a smokescreen. It turns out that distracting people from economic inequality, also known as the wealth gap, is far cheaper than paying fair wages and fair taxes. So let's call identity politics what it is, a smokescreen hiding the biggest con game that the economic elite, Wall Street, has pulled on the rest of us. Tax cuts for the rich, disguised as tax cuts for everyone. Cultural battles dominating headlines aren't ideological, they're calculated distractions. When LGBTQ plus issues dominate the news, real problems like stagnant wages, labor exploitation, and economic inequality fade into the background. This relentless culture war erodes trust, weakens social bonds, hinders grassroots organizing, and weakens community. Without strong, united communities, challenging wealth and power concentrations becomes an uphill battle. And hypocritically, as the media pundits are attacking LGBTQ communities, corporations are co-opting inclusion language for profit or public relations. Montana's leaders are playing the same game. On March 27, 2025, our GOP governor signed into law HB 121 and 300, passing both houses on a partisan vote, banning transgender individuals from using bathrooms and competing in sports aligned with their gender identity. The Republican controlled Montana House, Senate, and governor have failed once again to propose serious solutions to rising tax burdens for the working and middle classes of Montanans. While a feel-good bill, SB 90, reallocates tourism taxes to property tax relief, it does nothing to address the shifted tax burden of the past decades. The profits of large corporations, the accumulations of wealth by large landowners, the tax exemptions and benefits for high income households, and the profits from capital investments. All of these breaks for the wealthy remain untouched, and the rest of us continue to pay for those tax breaks. Consider this. A Montanan earning less than $18,000 a year pays 7.8% of their income in taxes. Meanwhile, those earning over $450,000 pay 6.5% of their income. Where's the fairness? Where is the outrage? It's time to reject these distractions and demand real reforms, like repeating the capital gains tax credit, expanding earned income tax credit, eliminating tax loopholes for corporations. Montana's future depends on us focusing on this economic justice and not smoke screens. And before you say this is a legislature issue and not a council issue, it is something that directly impacts on property tax, and it especially impacts directly on the homeowners of and residents of Billings, Montana. So if the city council is not advocating for property tax fairness, tax fairness in general, who else is going to stand up for the residents of Billings? Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good discussion.
Very good. Next.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. I would ask that you take a look at some of your TIF policies and make sure there's necessary sideboards on those policies. And look back at some of the recent ones. I mean, it's a good time to go back. Let's take a look. Let's take, for instance, Ace Hardware. They got $212,000 in 2018 to redevelop that property parcel. They added a parking lot, demolished the old house. But now, Ace Hardware, they purchased the property from the original owner, demolished the house, then got to sell it to the new guy that's now building a new business on it. Was the $212,000 of taxpayers necessary to facilitate that development? I don't know. Montana's a non-disclosure state on real estate transactions. We don't know what he paid for it. We don't know what he sold it for. And so we wouldn't have any idea did he profit off the backs of the taxpayers? No one knows. But if he's using taxpayer dollars, I think it ought to be fair game to find out if, in fact, he did, he didn't. But at the same time, we ought to have this information when you go forward with these TIF policies and these TIF grants. If there needs to be a clawback provision in there to make sure that these people aren't taking advantage of it, but we wouldn't have any idea. And so going forward, I'd like to see some additional, making sure the necessary sideboards are on there to make sure that we're protecting the taxpayer and not allowing possibly maybe someone helping themselves to some extra money. I wouldn't know, but we don't know that. We don't know it unless it's properly disclosed. On the second issue, I got to go. So on the police report, on traffic fatality or traffic wrecks, we've got a steady incline. We've been up we go again. I firmly believe that a lot of this is this insatiable need to race through town. I mean, everyone thinks they gotta have a race car, race truck, race motorcycle. Now, oh, it's spring, so now we gotta have a race ATV season. And 35-mile-an-hour roads, and we're killing people in town, maiming people in town. Innocent people gotta have untold issues put on their life because, you know, some guy was allowed to race through town. We see it every day, every day. I think I'll demand of this council, demand to your city administrator that he's gonna ask the chief we're gonna put some policy, we're just gonna actually enforce the law that's already in place. But we don't. Everyone races. Fire department, jaws of life every day, sawing people out of cars and high-speed traffic impacts that are just absolutely unnecessary because of the fact that we just do not take necessary steps to enforce some of our current laws that would possibly eliminate some of this, these guys from just making their race car. Let's see how fast we can go and let's see how much noise we can make. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Any other public comment at this point before we go to item 1 on our agenda? Any other public comment? No one is coming forward. We'll close the public comment and move on to our first item, which is an update on our Billings Industrial Revitalization District, the BIRD. So with that, I think we've got several representatives. We'll just ask you gentlemen that you introduce yourself and then and it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council and Mayor Cole. My name is Keith Robinson, 5118 Dovetail.
And Matthew McDonald, 2627 South Ridge Drive.
Thanks for having us. Mainly, we wanted to get here to give an update. We've actually sent out an email that hopefully you guys all had a chance to read and look over there. We found out during an IRS audit that we were recorded wrong. We were a 501c6 and should have been a 501c3. So just, I guess, giving you an update, we've got an attorney that's drawn up the documents and we've got that all in the work. We've been working with an accountant to do the tax planning now, and so hopefully I think we're headed in the right direction and should be going strong there. So just wanted to come and let you guys know we've been working with the city and keeping in touch, and you guys have all been great. You have something to say, Matt?
No, you covered it. Good.
You mind if we just ask you a question? I'll just ask the council if they've got any. I think that the obvious one is thank you for giving the update. Good luck on making that legal change. Do you think it has any real impact on the city? Obviously, the BIRD just makes recommendations to the city. So personally, I don't see that it matters to us, except we would obviously want you to comply with the law. So go forth and do that. But do you see any actual practical impact on our relationship?
No, Mayor Cole. So when we originally started, and this would go back to my dad and 3 other landowners back in 2006, and I started a few years after. So I've been on this for roughly 15 years. I don't even know, 15, 17 years. It was a membership base in the beginning, and then we became a TIF district, and so we started receiving funds from the city. That's what would have put us in compliance or non-compliance. And so we might have ran a little bit long on that. We didn't know. And then once we were audited, we found out this would cause nothing different. It's just as simple of changing our tax code, and it changes nothing for the city. So still get the same recommendation from us. Still great board. In fact, we had a couple members leave and we've already replaced 2. So doing strong in the neighborhood.
Very good. Thank you. Council members, any questions for either Keith or Matt? Councilmember Boyette.
Yeah, we'll file next week, and once it's filed, hopefully we can expedite the process. We don't know how long it'll take to get our status from the state, but I don't think it'll take longer than a few weeks. We're hoping.
Yeah, hoping to get the business license and our EIN. And hopefully the attorney's supposed to fill out that today for me.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for the update.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Guys.
All right, thank you. Second item on our agenda is, thank you, Councilmember Boyette. We do want to have an opportunity for public comment after each item. So is there any public comment on item number 1? Any public comment on item number 1? No one's coming forward. We'll close the public comment period. Move on to item number 2, which is our federal funding priority for Grand Avenue. Laura, I think you're our presenter, so we'll turn it over to you and to Rusty. Yeah, Laura, do you have a microphone? If could you snag this one closest to you there, maybe? And looks like we're good. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? Oh, great. Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm going to make this very easy and combine 2 and 3 into one because they're really tied hand in hand. And Rusty's bringing up the presentation now. We'll keep this very expedient and be available to answer questions. So this first request from the Billings Metropolitan Planning Organization is to the City Council to forward a recommendation to nominate Grand Avenue for federal funding to the Policy Coordinating Committee. In 2023, the Policy Coordinating Committee submitted a request to add Grand Avenue from 41st to 62nd and 62nd up to Rimrock Road to the urban system, which opens it up to allowing for federal funding to be used for reconstruction of those roadways. In this instance, Public Works, City Public Works approached us to look at our urban funding and our CMAQ funding to potentially fund the reconstruction of Grand Avenue, which they're proposing for 2028. And this would be fully federally funded. There would be no local contribution other than developer contributions that have already been accessed through development. So this is the first request that we are bringing through on consent agenda next Monday night that will go to our Policy Coordinating Committee this month. So that's the first item. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or move right into the tip.
Are there any questions on this? You can obviously come back, but let's just
Right.
focus on this item. Councilmember Denise, you had something?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So when you talk about the redevelopment of that, sorry, how, we have trouble with Grand Avenue now, or just in the early part of it with buildings built right there, next to the sidewalks, and you really can't widen the street anymore. So how when we talk about redeveloping that, what is the plan to redevelop that to?
My understanding is the City Public Works is proposing this to develop it as a typical city arterial roadway, which would be 2 travel lanes and a center turn lane for access points, a multi-use path on one side and a sidewalk on the other. There will be a new street light put in at 56th Street West, as well as street lights along the corridor. It's very dark out there right now. So this project will accomplish to not only provide additional roadway and turning movements out of the driving lanes, it'll also address 3 safe routes to school projects along there to enhance pedestrian mobility through there. So that is the main intent, is to develop it as city arterial. There will be right-of-way purchase that will have to be done through the design phase.
Okay, and then will these sidewalks have boulevard walks, so they're separating the pedestrians away from the traffic more?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Neese. Most all of the new requirements for these arterial
Okay.
roadways is to provide for boulevard
Great,
separation.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other, Councilmember Rupes?
Thank you, Mayor. Laura, I just want to ask a kind of a philosophical question. Why is Grand Avenue a federal concern? Is Grand Avenue part of the state highway system? It's a local road, right? It's not a state road. It seems to me that we've kind of allowed ourselves to sprawl and expand way out west, and then we're kind of holding up our hands and saying, hey, can we get federal funding to now make our roads support that? We're going to have to maintain that road long term. I'm just struggling, like, philosophically. Why is this take the money, sure, but why is this a federal concern? Why should the federal government say, yeah, we think our money is well spent on Grand Avenue?
Thank you, Councilmember Rupes. Let me clarify a little bit about what being an MPO does allow. So being a metropolitan planning organization, not only do we get transportation planning dollars that then lead to federal funded transportation projects, it gives us an allocation of varying federal funding sources directly to the community to allocate how we feel, how we see fit. So we annually procure federal transportation dollars in our TIP, which is our requesting the use of our federal dollars that are already ours We are just allocating them to a project that we feel that the city is and county both feel locally is a very high priority to make more safe and make access more available along that route. There is still significant property to be developed there, and every time a new property develops and adds more traffic, it's more difficult to get in and out safely. So that's why we are requesting to add it to our local federal funding priority, because right now we really don't have any. There's some other projects that are in the TIP that are being funded, like the Zoo Drive, MDT Zoo Drive program. They're also suggesting adding to the TIP, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I just want to demonstrate how it all works together. The MDT is proposing adding a project to our TIP, which is a safety project. We also get allocated some highway safety dollars through data collection and safety concerns for a roundabout at 48th and King. So those projects, once they go through the planning process and get included, and in this case, adding Grand Avenue to as a priority, opens it up to use those federal dollars that are already there that we are just not using right now. An urban route. So because we're an urbanized area, we have roadways that are that are distinguished as urban system routes. So yes, Shiloh and King are state routes, but like Bench Boulevard, those improvements on Bench Boulevard were done through the federal funding priority when those roads were improved. Airport Road, which is a state highway, but those were also done through the federal allocation of our TIP dollars.
When Grand Avenue is redeveloped, is the city going to have responsibility for maintenance on that road, plowing, resurfacing, all that kind of stuff?
Yes, just as it was if the city had the funding to actually do those reconstruction projects now, the city would be responsible
But we
for
don't pay
maintenance.
for all that now, right? Do we split it with the county, or how does that work?
That is a good question. Yes, because it's a very mixed mash of ownership out there on Grand Avenue.
And when it's redeveloped, we'll continue to split it with the county?
No, I don't think so. I think this will be built,
All ours.
right.
All right. So how do we know how much, extra this is going to cost us to maintain every year, and how much development we're going to have to support to cover those increased development costs, maintenance costs?
Unfortunately, I do not know that answer. Unfortunately, not my area of expertise.
But we've heard
But-
a lot recently about ROI of different transportation. People don't like trails because they're, what's the ROI? Well, it seems to me we should know the same here. If we want to expand this, take $22 million worth of federal funds to do this road, and then assume all the maintenance costs on that ongoing, we should have some idea about the extra cost of maintenance and the overall ROI. How much new development do we have to put out there? If we have to put 25,000 houses out there to pay the maintenance cost over 20 years, I'm not sure people would find that a good deal. But I understand that might not be your realm, but I think before we get ahead of ourselves and say, yeah, we're going to take this $22 million, maybe we should have the math done.
Very good, thank you. Again, on Grand Avenue, not the bigger picture, because we still have to get into item 3. Councilor Neese?
Yeah, I'm sorry, if you're going to talk about this later, then you can sure cut me off, but Councilmember Rups was asked a good question about that, and I agree with him. I think we need to see that, but why, I guess, who sets that priority that it's Grand Avenue versus, say, Rimrock or something like that? Because we hear a lot, at least I hear a lot of complaints about Rimrock, and I've been out there at times, and it's just really impacted with the traffic. So why aren't we going after federal funds to really get that road corrected? Because that's long overdue, I think more overdue than Grand Avenue is.
Thank you, Councilmember Neese. And again, I can't speak to specifics about the actual infrastructure projects, but my understanding that the City Public Works is moving forward with the improvements to Rimrock in the next year. And the reason they're staggered is they want to make sure that Rimrock gets done before Grand Avenue does, to make sure the traffic continues to flow. In this instance, I don't think Rimrock felt as good as a roadway to add to our urban system as did Grand Avenue, because of the development opportunities that have occurred and will continue occurring all the way out Grand, and the infrastructure that's already in place with water and sewer. So I think that is the reason in 2023, they asked the Highway Commission to add Grand Avenue to the local urban system. When looking at actually funding then a project, once Grand Avenue was added to that urban system, it did allow it to be included for future federal funding. Again, it's 100% federally funded. Maintenance, I will pass that on to Public Works Engineering and try to get them an answer back to you on that. But my understanding is both these roadways are going to be done in the next few years.
So Grand Avenue done with federal funding and Rimrock done with local funding?
Gas tax would be my assumption, and any developer that they may have occurred out there, but
Okay, and so I guess I'm thinking if we were gonna use federal funding, it would have been on Rimrock Road, not on. Because until we just came tonight, I haven't heard about it. Maybe I missed it somewhere.
this was, thank you, Councilmember Neese. This was a process that went through in 2023. It was initiated by the city to look at adding Grand Avenue to the urban system. One thing to understand, when we add a segment of roadway to the urban system, we're only allowed so many urban system routes within our urbanized area. So when we add, sometimes we have to take away. And I would have to look back to see if I don't think we actually lost a whole lot during the inclusion of Grand Avenue to our urban system. But at that time, the city and the county, as there's both jurisdiction out there, felt the Grand Avenue was the most appropriate to move forward with federal funding in 2023. And we took it through the transportation planning process, and the PCC made that request to the State Highway Commission then.
Okay, thank you. And I'll recognize Councilmember, City Minister Kukulski. I'll just comment though that the Rimrock project's been in the CIP for 3 years probably, and also shows the breakdown of funding resources in the CIP. But Chris?
Yeah, and just communicating with Debbie a little bit. A couple things. Federal funding for Grand will open up some funding for Rimrock. They're pretty tied together. It doesn't answer your question as to who prioritizes, but I would, and on the maintenance side, it's mostly city, some county. The statute now requires us, when we annex a piece of property that's contiguous to a road, we get the whole right of way. We're mandated to take the right of way, so there's no longer the kind of even half and half. So annex a piece, you're getting the whole cross section. So most of the maintenance is ours, but some is county. And then last, there's 3 schools along Grand. So
Laura, does Rusty have anything on item number 2, or should we go on to 3? Okay, why don't you go on to 3, and we'll come back as council needs to.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So this then leads into an amendment to our transportation improvement program. This is the actual federal funding guidelines for the MPO through 2028. We periodically update this document just because things change, projects get added, financial adjustments are made as projects get into the more design and engineering. We get better cost estimates. And timings change sometimes based on, is there a delay with the right-of-way that we need to move a project out a little bit? So when we do a TIP amendment, that's usually what's occurring, is we're altering things in our transportation improvement program. So in this situation, up here on your screen is the projects that we're adding. Again, as mentioned, we are recommending adding Grand Avenue. The federal funding sources for this project include our surface transportation program, our urban funds, as well as congestion mitigation and air quality, which can be used for items such as sidewalks, roundabouts, multi-use paths, those types of things, as well as transit, street sweepers. There's a lot of funding that or projects you can use CMAQ funding for. As I mentioned, the other one is MDT sponsored for King Avenue and 48th Street West. This is for a roundabout out there, and this is again for highway safety improvements through the highway safety program, as well as carbon reduction funds. Those funds are very similar to CMAQ. They can be used to offset some of the impacts of normal roadways in relationship to something like a roundabout or providing for transit and other projects. Another project that we had a placeholder in there was for the Southern Riverfront Park Trail and Education sign. This is a placeholder that we started incorporating because the city often every year applies for recreational trails program funds. So that is in there. And then I did give you a sheet that outlined where the changes were in red, and they were in green, and those were included in your tip document. So I know you can't read this one, it's very small, but again in red, this is the general overall Billings MPO project list. You're gonna see a lot of these projects on here aren't directly related to the city or the county. A lot of them are MDT projects because MDT also, we have to include their projects in our tip, and then our projects get included in their statewide transportation improvement program. I did want to note that on one thing, can you go back real quick? Sorry. One thing that's new to our tip table is we've added for federal highway guidance performance measures, how we feel these projects meet our state-supported performance measures, such as air quality, crash data, those types of things. So you will see that in the tip. Yeah, you can move forward. So again, these are just a continuing list based on the funding sources of where these projects fall in the federal funding. You can keep going. And that's another page. There's a lot of projects in there. You can go one more. Okay, and then I'll turn it over to Rusty because they also have projects in the tip.
Thank you, Rusty.
All right, thank you. Good evening. As far as transit goes, this is a regular process for us because we receive annual apportionments through the Federal Transit Administration for different sections of funding. Primarily our projects this year around our 5307, which is the operating funds that we receive annually from the Federal Transit Administration. So that includes project amounts for maintenance, paratransit, and operations. We are federally required to publish that program of projects table, which you'll find at the bottom of the 5307 table page, which just breaks out what our anticipated spending is going to be on each of those different categories. We do have a couple updates to the 5339, which is our capital funding. It is divided into two separate sections on the 5339 page, as you'll see here shortly, including our formula funds, which are received annually based on the federal apportionment calculations. And then we do have some competitive funding that was received here recently that's been programmed in there as well. That's primarily for paratransit vehicle replacement related maintenance equipment. 5310, which is our human services coordinated transportation funds that are received by the urbanized area. Updates there really surround the updates to our coordination plan for the year, as well as the agreed upon priorities of projects that are in there as well, which includes funding for vehicles for core enterprises this year, Big Sky Senior Services, and then some Met Transit bus stop improvements. And then we updated with our actual apportionments from Transit, which is actually a state source that we're required to publish in here. So again, flowing through, the transit tables actually have yellow highlights on them, mostly because I'm colorblind, so I need to call those out. But you'll see there the updated programmed amounts, and then that program of projects is listed there at the bottom. Moving forward, again, just identifying those anticipated federal amounts with the programs in the section 5339, and then specifically the discretionary funding shows that competitive grant that we had recently received. And again, here 5310 calls out the specific projects, as I mentioned, for core enterprises, Big Sky Senior Services and Met Transit, and then those specific transit. And with that, I think we're happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay, those are some of the projected amendments. Questions either for Laura or Rusty. Councilor Rasmussen?
I was just going to clarify for Councilman Neese. In the CIP, Rimrock is scheduled for, it's split funded over fiscal 26 and 27, and Grand Avenue is 27, 28. So Rimrock does come first and then Grand comes.
Other questions for either? Councilmember Owen? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you. Mayor, Laura, this might not be right exactly on target, but I'm just trying to get my head around sort of what's going to happen here. So this will come to us on the 14th for approval and then forward to the PCC, which means the next day, right? And then is this the only thing going to the PCC on that day?
No, Mayor and Councilmember Owen, we have several items that need policy coordinating action. The first is the request to add Grand Avenue.
Mhm.
The second is the tip, And the third is we have to, as the MPO in our process, take the ped bike plan through for final action on that day as well. There'll be 3 items.
Okay, so the council rejecting the bike ped plan and the commission rejecting the bike ped plan does not constitute final action. There's that third step of the PCC.
Councilmember Owen, council members, that is correct. The governing bodies don't actually formally adopt or not adopt a plan. They make a recommendation to the policy coordinating committee. So as part of our MPO process, when we come forward in your staff memos, it often states, staff recommends that the city council forward a recommendation of blank to the policy coordinating committee. So, no, we will take those recommendations to the policy coordinating committee and they will take final action.
Okay, and then follow up, Mayor, just this is my last, just procedurally, whatever you're doing with the bike ped plan is not an amendment to the tip, right? At
No.
this time? Okay,
No.
thank you.
Councilor Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, you mentioned earlier about when you added the Grand Avenue as into the plan here, you had to cut some roadways out. Is there anywhere we can find where what roads or what pathways were cut out?
Yes, absolutely. I actually wrote this down to send you guys a copy of the urban system map. So you can see what roadways are actually included in that. A lot of times there's small sections that are not going to be eligible either for federal funding or not a local priority for improvements. So that is the first thing I will do is send you guys that map so you can see where those urban system roadways are.
The ones that were actually being cut out.
No, it's what we currently have as our urban system. I'd have to look back in the records to see if there were actually any, we're allowed certain amount of miles for our urban system. I will have to look and see back in 2023. I don't believe we lost anything locally that was, that would either have been recommended for federal priority or was such a small segment that didn't make sense being on the urban system.
Okay, yeah, I'm more interested to find out what we're giving up for the Grand Avenue.
I will look back on those records and see if we lost anything. Thank you.
Other questions, Councilor Ripsos?
Thank you, Mayor. Not exactly on topic, but since the bike plan was brought up, I'm actually just curious what our recommendation to the PCC would be. As I recall, we took, my words, the rather cowardly action of just setting that aside and not taking any action of it at all. So I'm unsure of what we'll be saying to the PCC other than just they tabled it and just refused to have a discussion.
Councilmember Repsis and Council. So when we're developing our memo to the Policy Coordinating Committee right now, and when we do our stakeholders and our background information, so what we will be proposing in that memo is we'll provide that information. So in the instance of the planning board, we will write in our memo that the planning board is recommending that the PCC approve the ped bike plan. We will then state that the county commissioners voted to recommend not to approve the ped bike plan to the PCC. With the table, or with the city tabling the actual document, the city will not have a vote at the policy coordinating committee on this actual item because there was no recommended action provided. And then MDT is the fourth wheel of that. They have not been privy to a lot of this background information. So in our memo, we will supply all that information about what has occurred with the boards and commissions and let them vote how they feel they need to vote on at that meeting.
Other questions for Laura or Rusty before we open up for public comment? I'll ask, I see, I've spent a lot of time at MSUB today, or not today, over the weekend, and I see Steve Schonder, who's been a big supporter of the Yellow Jacket Trail. That didn't rise to the top in the proposed bike plan, bike ped plan. It has no role in this list, I'm assuming, and should it?
In the tip, or the which?
In number 3.
No, there's no federal funding associated with that project. The project is not in our tip. It's
Only
not
Stagecoach.
only Stagecoaches. That was a transportation alternatives project that is administered down through MDT and then locally to the MPOs. So it's only projects that are approved locally that would be in our tip.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Wyeth, please.
Maybe I can speak up here since maybe.
You can just pop it off if you want. It's already on.
You're not allowed to comment if you're over 6 feet.
Here.
I just wanted to clarify A little bit more on the Grand Avenue project, only because when the discussions, when you're asking about prioritization and things like that. So there's a lot of history with Grand Avenue. As Councilmember Aspenlater pointed out, it's in the CIP. It's been in the CIP for a few years. That was something that the city placed in the CIP and approved. It's in the long-range transportation plan that was approved by the council and as part of the PCC process in 2023. And so that's why it's in there as well. So, and then we have some smaller ancillary studies where improvements along Grand Avenue have been identified. So just to be clear, this isn't the first time that the council and the PCC have decided that Grand Avenue is a priority and have included it in very specific documents to move it forward. So I just want to make sure that everybody's, understands that. We can certainly, like Laura said, share some of the background on that and also the urban system information. But there's been multiple steps, including putting it on the urban system that the council also supported in 2023 through PCC. So just a little bit of background there on how this got to here. This isn't the first time at all that project has been brought forward and was prioritized and decided to be prioritized by the city. So thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Aspenlater?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Friday, just a question kind of in that vein. Now that we're building this out, I presume we're still going to be capturing contributions from adjacent landowners that will annex at some point in time, the Kramer property, the stuff north of the Kramer property, those areas yet to be developed along Grand. I'm assuming we'll still capture developer contributions for what was paid to build out Grand. Is that accurate, or how are we going to deal with that?
Councilmember Aspenlater, Mayor and Council. So I guess first, right, we've already collected contributions with development that's occurred along Grand. And as far as I would understand, we would continue to do so for any projects that would occur in the future for there. And then I'd have to talk to Public Works in terms of how those would then, where those funding would fall after the project's complete. But yes, there would be no change in how that's done.
Very good. Important question. Yeah, because just legally, I just want to comment on that. It's an interesting question because we sometimes have a situation where we've got other funds, but legally we can still get exactions from developers and should for their proportional impact on the road. So we don't want to leave that money on the table. And I don't think legally there's any problem with collecting those dollars and putting them someplace else because we've got other dollars, but you'd want to check with that. But I don't know of any reason we couldn't do that. There's no reason why those developers should get off scot-free just because Uncle Sam is nice to us, for example. Okay, Councilmember Kennedy.
I just want to make a comment on the federal funding and the state funding, because if you look at it all, and I sat on the National Transportation Board for many years, when we looked at CTEP projects, which was the first bike trails and walking trails and all of that 25 years ago, what we also looked at is during probably about 15 years ago, when I sat on that board, we also looked at a way to fund trails and walking paths and all of that. And we brought up nationally that there needs to be a funding source because we aren't receiving any funding source we wanted to put a tax on bike tires. We want to designate a lot of those different funding sources because the committee at the national level looked at where are you receiving money for federal dollars and state dollars. It's through a gas tax. And so we tried to do it. We looked at it. It never went through. And so local governments today are being, if there's a few dollars that come around for any of these, there's no local dollars statewide or nationally that are designated, and our arterial street dollars are all for the funding of the roadways. And that's, you know, if it's really that big an issue on the maintenance of all of these, then maybe there should be some type of voted on levy on it to ask people to maintain them. And I think those of you, Councilman Rupsis, it's a big issue for you, that maybe that's something that you're interested in and go forward. I think the one thing that we don't have the clout in Washington, D.C. We used to get $2.18 for every dollar we sent back. One of these days, we may not even get the amount of money we're getting back. And if they ever turn to and say, we'll give you back the same amount of dollars that that you're paying in, we're sunk, because we have so many roadways and all of that. The other piece I just wanted to clarify, and Councilman Aspel understands this very well, is all of this goes through the state red book, and all of these projects are placed, and they either receive urban money, which comes from federal and state dollars, or they receive state dollars for these roadways, or if they are constructed, we have an agreement with the state that we will maintain them. And that's how all of this comes through. And it's a long process, but it's been in the books for, 5 years? I think the red book goes out as far. But, there's a lot of things that aren't funded, but there are monies designated for these roadways and constructing those roadways throughout this community. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. A few more questions, and then we'll open up for public comment on either items 2 or 3. Councilmember Gulick.
Actually, not a question, just a sort of clarification, though. At least in the city, about only 25% of the costs of our street improvements is from the gas tax. It is mostly property taxes or street assessments, actually, as well as so some people are very intensive users of streets, and others are not as much, and so but some people are paying a lot even though they don't use very much of the streets because of the street assessments.
Very good. Anything else before we have public comment? Okay, let's open it up for public comment on, we've kind of conflated these two, number 2 and number 3, both the additional Grand Avenue to our federal funding priority list, and then the Transportation Improvement Program amendment for the next 4 years, items 2 and 3. Any public comment, please feel free, come to the podium if you'd like to be heard on either one of those items. Any public comment on either item 2 or number 3? Any public comment before I close public comment period? No one's coming forward, so we will close the public comment period on number 2, number 3. Before we move on to the Police Department annual report, Council, anything else further on items 2 or 3? Okay, we'll see those next week. Thank you. All right, we'll then turn it over to the Chief. Chris or Kevin, do you have anything in the way of preliminaries for the Chief of Police, except to tell him to stop his usual gloating over the fire department and their success on the ice on Saturday night, which was absolutely packed? I went there and there was no place to park within block, so I gave up. I'm sorry. If you were looking for me, Chief, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
No. Wow. It's hot now. Since you brought it up a second time, Mayor, I'll take this rare opportunity. So though this will be a little out of context, but I've always been a Wolverine fan, but my actual degree is from Western Michigan, who's in the Frozen Four for the first time in history. So to have a little Mid-American Conference school playing hockey, college NCAA Division I hockey this week is a big deal for Kalamazoo. So hopefully this weekend, Thursday and this weekend will be very good for us.
All
Thanks.
right.
Chief.
Hockey is hot and in the air in Billings. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening. I want to provide a overview and executive summary for you of our 2024 annual report. You should have received the full report in your Friday packet, 40 or so pages. Credit to our support services supervisor, Becky Shea. This is other duties as assigned. Aside from taking care of clerical staff, reports, records, all that, she takes time out to, excuse me, do this report for me and ultimately you, which leads a little bit to the delay. So apologize, but here it is, and kudos to her. Certainly, I hope that you recognize the department commitment to serve the community with integrity and professionalism and dedication. The overview is intended to provide context to the larger numbers that you see. I get asked how I thought 2024 went, and in one word, what I'll say is calmer. We're not crime free. We didn't eradicate it in any way, shape, or form. We still have some work to do, but I think that the emphasis of both the police department and the council, we saw some successes there, and hopefully this report will highlight some of that. These are I got this right in the middle of me here. So just go away. Thank you. These are calls for service or incidents for 2024 compared to 10 years past. You can see that we've pretty much held steady for the last few years. The numbers that you see right here represent a 4.5% decrease over 2023. So again, when I say calmer, we're down calls. Officers aren't running around as much. Again, we still had some stuff. I think that attributes to a lot of our strategies, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But again, the efforts that we may have put forth have made an effort or have made an impression here. In your packet or the main report, which I didn't print out here, but you did have a beat map. And the highest number of calls in our beats were what we call Bravo 2 or B2. Back when Mr. Niflin and I were doing it, we had a really, really technical number for it. We called it Beat 3. But these guys changed it to B2 or Bravo 2. It essentially encompasses the downtown area. It runs up to Virginia, and then along the rims down to the metro area and all the way down to state. So that's the beat that generated the most calls. Combined there was 15,371. What I would point out is that that encompasses the entire downtown area, North Park, calls generated by our downtown business officers, calls generated at the front counter at police department, and calls generated by our officers at the hospital, not to mention citizens calling in for stuff. So that's the reason for that high number. Our West End beats combined for 27,000. Very, very linear, very long, and getting bigger as we speak, as we keep annexing stuff. And then followed up by the Heights, which had 15,000, and that too is getting pretty big. And so, again, when you tally all those up, 86,000. But we know where our work has been. What's generating it is in the downtown area, as it has been for several years. Our homicides, this number here reflects that we had an increase overall, and we did as you look at these numbers. 17 and 14 respectively. A caveat here is that Three of the what's classified as the criminal homicides were missing persons, which by default turn into homicides statistically. I don't want to minimize anybody's loss, people's families and all that. Two victims were found out of jurisdiction. One we have not located yet. And just the way the records go, that comes back as a criminal homicide. So again, don't want to minimize anything. There's some context to three additional there. If we don't have those, then we're lower than we were last year. The four negligent homicides you'll see will correlate with our traffic report and our fatalities. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Aggravated assaults has been a hot topic for many years. We've been on a steady downward trend for the past 3 years. Unfortunately, we have an upward tick. This number reflects 15% increase over 2023. But again, my question to myself and to explain to you is why is that number gone up? Specifically, what we have seen are 16% increases in assault with a weapon, 69 in criminal endangerment. Now, these are generally how officers code calls when they go on them. It'll come in as something going on, and at the end of the day, this is how they will code that. So what we're seeing is that even though we have fewer calls, and you'll see that our weapons calls are down significantly, weapons were used. Not necessarily as a gun, it could be a knife, could be a club, a chair, anything could be a weapon. But we see those being used. The criminal endangerment is kind of a catch-all term. If you do anything that can potentially seriously injure or kill somebody, that's criminal endangerment. So it could be shooting a gun into the crowd. It could be vehicles. The most recent example would be the individuals who stole a car and drove through some school zones 2 weeks ago. That resulted in 3 or 4 criminal endangerment charges for one individual. And that reflects on these statistics. And so you have an individual and then multiple counts. So what we're seeing is we're holding people accountable for putting people in danger, more so than probably what we have seen before. To this council's emphasis is we saw a 1% reduction in PFMA strangling or strangulation and a 21% decrease in PFMA physical assault. This was an emphasis that was made very clear. We applied resources, we applied training. Officer Nash indicated, you'll see this on the non-aggravated, that they generated 100 more cases just that office themselves. So we engaged in what it is. What's causing the most push in the numbers, of course, was everything domestic. So in the case of the felony side, stagnant on the strangulation and decrease on actual physical stuff. I will also tell you that the clinic has been engaged in a what's called a forensic strangulation exam service. The BPD has been the sole user of that. They have just opened it up to other law enforcement. So here, what we're doing, it is victim oriented. We are encouraging them, depending what the circumstances are, to go get a forensic exam to see the extent of injuries, if there are any, which of course can lead to changes if it's not evident to an officer at the scene. That has some victim services attached to it, so potential reimbursement, some monies there. But proud to be the sole user of that for now, and I'm also happy that we can get our partners involved in this because this problem isn't unique to Billings, obviously. The other thing that is concerning, but certainly drives the numbers, are assault on police officers increased. And again, the numbers are relatively low in general, but 185% over 2023. And what you're going to see is that increases in assaults on police officers, resisting arrest, obstructing, disorderly conduct, and some of the misdemeanor stuff shows that, again, the justice system is re-engaging. We're getting people arrested and they're not liking it, and we're getting our officers assaulted. And so, again, we're able to drive down and do a pretty good job with our citizens, but our officers are getting assaulted as well, which is an aggravated assault as well. And so again, context. Have our strategic objectives been successful in making progress and where we wanted to get to? Absolutely. But now we gotta, stop resisting, when somebody tells you something. So that's a really big driver there. I know that we have, I think April is, no assault on children. I don't know what the exact term is. The blue, what is it? Whatever, for the kids. So, yeah. Well, here we have a 44% decrease in assaults on minors. But if you, in your report, you'll see that the crimes against the family are still pretty prevalent. Those are not dispatched. They generally come directly from DFS, child support, and into our detective division. But so there's some work to be done there. You can see here's how our aggravated assaults broke out. As I indicated, 16%, 69%, and then we have negatives for the PFMA, and then on around. Understand, I know that we've gone round and round on numbers. The FBI continues to change things. They did so in October. We have Part A and Part B crimes in the NIBRS system. Part A has 56 categories and subcategories. Part B, which is the lesser, has 10. And so, we're trying to sort through all this stuff to give you the information that I think you want, that the community wants. Our robberies have gone down. Once again, the strategy to seek out and target the worst of the worst with all of our partners in the community have made a difference the last couple of years. As far as our gun charges, as far as our the homicide stuff, as far as our assaults, and robbery is no different. There's a bunch of people that are in jail right now that were causing problems. And that's just a great effort by not only the police department, but all of our partners as well. Primarily a lot of the juvenile individuals are in Pine Hills or are waiting to go to Pine Hills. Our weapons offenses, and this again is commensurate to what I told you before, 18% decrease over 2023, and you can see how far we've dropped since 2022. So we are getting the people that are shooting the guns, shooting at people, and we're getting the firearms themselves. I'll report out what that is. So this is significant. Of that 70 number of 73, 72% were coded as discharging a firearm in city limits. So here's your guy that just decides to pull out a gun and start shooting in the air, or not necessarily at anything. But you all hear the gunshot calls or whatnot. So of those, 72% are just people pulling over and shooting and doing whatever. Our non-aggravated assaults, so now we're talking about your misdemeanor things. Simple for the most part. 17% increase over 2023. Again, the question is why? We have 16% in simple disorderly conduct. I'm sorry, let's see here. Hiding something. You see that top one? So, okay. So partner family member assault. Here we are on the misdemeanor side, down just under 1%. So once again, good progress with that. The non-aggravated is your misdemeanor assault, simple assault. That's up. Resisting arrest, as I indicated, 23%. Disorderly, up significantly, 200, again, low numbers. Here's the big number that really pushed our stats here. The apprehension, reasonable apprehension on PFMA, you show 55 here. That was a 400% increase over last year. We didn't have any of that. So this goes to the training, the victim based listening, getting people to, be more open, the interview techniques, and getting them to talk about this stuff. This is a real thing, and it's a violation. If the victim is afraid, that's a PFMA, and so we have that going on. And again, when you get Officer Nash and now her partner working on these things, we have that increase. Stalking was up. Negligent endangerment is the misdemeanor version of criminal endangerment, so it's not likely to seriously injure or kill you, but it's going to hurt and all that. So again, doing something that kind of stupid that's going to hurt people or putting people at risk. Again, an increase there. So when you look at all those, that was the combined increase on our misdemeanor stuff. But again, what I want to highlight on is the PFMA stuff has been stagnant or down, and that was a big focus on a lot of the stuff that we were doing. Getting into property crime, burglaries, up 5%. 60% of our victims were residential. Not all of them were commercial. There were some other things. We did have some aggravated burglaries, and what that means is that when they go in, they assault somebody. So you probably have some of your assault with a weapon are referenced in the aggravated burglaries. Theft offenses, we went down. Again, this is our misdemeanor side, re-engaging, 10%. What went down was overall, just things that were laying around. Shoplifting went down. Theft from a motor vehicle, I'm very, very thankful because that was a 20% decrease, and a lot of those back in the day were firearms. And so I am not a Second Amendment opposer. That's what the sheriff and I were accused of. We were asking people to be responsible gun owners, take your gun in and all that. So hopefully, a lot of those messages sunk in. Motor parts, again, there was a concerted effort to get after people who were taking the catalytic converters. We had programs where they were stenciled and marked. We engaged help from our junk people or recyclers, and that's made a difference as well. The one thing that did jump up significantly was fraud cases. So that would be your bad checks, your credit cards. I think everybody in here knows somebody who was scammed over the phone. Somebody here was asked to bail out their grandchild in jail. And some people do that, and I just feel for them. But that was a significant 27% increase over that. Stolen vehicles, we're down again. Once again, we take the worst of the worst off, and who's causing our problems. The commensurate stats follow. The unauthorized use is basically, my friend took my car without permission. They don't want to report it stolen because it's not, but they want the thing back. It's a misdemeanor charge, but you can see those went down as well. Some ancillary things here, which I think shows more of our quality of life issues citywide, and again how the citizens have engaged, the police officers have engaged. Criminal mischief, of course, is vandalism, obstructing justice. This is what I talked about before. This is generally coming from the officers when people are lying to them or resisting arrest. Disorderly conduct, causing issues, could be loud music, could be fighting, and trespass. We have a lot of people. Again, we're re-engaged on the stuff that really irritates the citizens, this stuff here. Getting into our traffic, driving under the influence, certainly still a problem. It goes on. I will say that bottom one, 4 fatalities, as a result of drinking and driving or under the influence of some other substance is unacceptable in today's day. And so we still continue to work that with education, with enforcement. We have grant monies from the state, and then everybody's everybody is tasked with working on that. This slide here really indicates, I think the scope of the problem in some situations. If you can see that the blue line, average alcohol highest is in the gray. That's the thing that's interesting. You'll see the month of August, the highest BA was 0.432. Okay, that is a highly functioning alcoholic that's operating at that. For most people, 0.4 is dead. I said most people, but you can see those are pretty high BAs, and those are the high ones for the month. So you've got them in between there. So again, there's a problem. We have to deal with this, and we'll keep after that. Citations and warnings, pretty much the same. A little bit of decrease in the citations, and an increase in the warnings. I think every one of you has received a call or two from your constituents on drivers in the neighborhood, school zones, all of that. We have 3 dedicated traffic officers. We're down 17 right now, and we'll do our very best to get on that traffic. But we also have calls for service that we have to get to. The accidents just up a little bit. The good news, if there is such a good news on an accident, is that the major increase were in property damage. So our injury accidents were down 1.2%. So again, we're going in the right direction on that. However, we have more property damages. Our citizens were a little bit more conscientious on hit and runs. I'm sorry, not quite so conscientious, up just a little bit. The accidents, the frequency, generally we have the roundabouts in the top 5. I have 2 in the top 5 here, so people are getting better. However, you can see the bigger intersections are problematic for some of our drivers. We'll keep working on that. The other thing I would point out is that 7 out of those 11 up there are right angle intersections. And when you start comparing the injury accidents at those versus the roundabout, there's no comparison. The roundabouts have eliminated right angle accidents head on, right away type stuff. If you have a wreck in a roundabout, it's generally an angle glancing. Obviously, you got the drunk going the wrong way and can't, who put the big flower pot in the middle of the road. You have those things, but for the most part, it's banging into people sideways, and we don't have injuries. So mission accomplished there. But obviously, you can see our big intersections need attention, and that's what we are working on doing. Arrest stats in general, you can kind of see where the majority. This would be the top 5. The point I want to make for you is that of our 9,900 total arrests, 5,800 of them, or 60%, were administrative violations. Revoked, suspended, non-appearance, warrants. In other words, we've had them before. This is the 2nd, 3rd, 4th time that these people have been through the system. So, and here goes our discussion about the arraignment court, getting people in, getting them out, taking care of these things here. That's hopefully what we'll be able to report when that gets up and running, that I'm not going to have so many non-appearance warrants. And then if we do revoke somebody's sentence, revoked or deferred, that they got a place to go, rather than give them another pass and we got to deal with them a few weeks down the road. On the juvenile side, we still continue to deal with substance, so the tobacco, the vaping, the alcohol. I think what's concerning, assaults made the top 5, but there was PFMA's in there as well. You have young children assaulting their family members, whether it's siblings or parents. And our SROs are on the hop. And so a lot of stuff going there. And then special mention here to end it up, our volunteer program, do an outstanding job. You can see 3,600 hours, 2,200 abandoned vehicle reports. They tagged 1,500. You can imagine what we would look like. This group here is just outstanding. So that donated hours actually equates into a dollar amount. What that is, I can't tell you, but it's not officers out doing that stuff. Good stuff there. Just for, make sure you know that animal control, it's the smallest division in the city, 7 total. They handled 60,000 or 6,000, issued 1,100 citations. They're down 3 ECO officers, and mainly they're losing them to code enforcement. It's a pay thing. And we're working with HR and all that. But if some of you have been around, people are passionate about their animals. And we better make sure that we're handling correctly and being able to deal with stuff. And then last, our specialized units out there, you don't see them hanging around up here. They're out doing other stuff. But in total, 98 pounds of meth, 54,000 fentanyl pills, 31 grams of fentanyl powder, and 172 firearms off the street by these groups here. Just outstanding work across the board. Do we have some work to do? Absolutely. But I think, I hope that you realize the good work that they're doing, the complex environment that they're operating in. And then again, for Councilmember Repsis, you always ask me this question, so I'll take the initiative on this. Right now, we are approved at 177 sworn officers. Currently, we have 158. We have 0 in field training. That means all 158 are deployed doing what they do. We have 6 at the academy that are going to graduate on Friday. And I was assured they're going to graduate on Friday. Unless something happens between now and Friday, Mr. Riplin. We have 10 in backgrounds. We have 11 applications for the January academy. We have 4 that are hired already, just awaiting for a start date. They are post-certified. And I have 1 pending retirement. Probably much to some of your grin, not me quite yet, but we do have 1 in the hopper potentially. And that is the end of report, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Those numbers, that's where I wanted to go. Just what we're looking at staff-wise. On the inside cover of the report, sort of the table of contents, it said that in 2024 we had 8 new officers join the department, but 4 retirements, which would be a break even. It was a wash. We didn't add, but we didn't go backwards. Fortunately, we had the 4 CSOs, community service officers, that do such a great job. But can you just kind of summarize with all those numbers that you went through? It looks like you've got a lot in the hopper, but we're 19 down from full deployment. For the public, in a sentence, what's the next year look like when it comes to numbers?
Certainly, Mayor. Thank you. Well, we have not had trouble getting people in the door. The issue is getting them through training and up and running as officers. And so one of the hurdles that we have is at the academy. Every other agency is trying to get officers on. We have standing reservations for 7 officers at the basic academy, and they have 3 scheduled for this year. So if all we hire are non-post certified, there's 21, assuming everybody gets out, and it's going to take them 8 months from start to finish to get out of training and on their own. What we are looking at is putting on our own academy. That way we will save some money. We can turn them around, much quicker, and we can also, handle more at one time. We certainly have the expertise. We certainly have the facilities to do that. And we just need to get, approval, from MLEA. Bozeman's doing it right now through some arrangement with the college there. And so we are looking at that so we can turn officers out a lot sooner. Also, kind of fell into our lap, and I know there was discussion, but one of our legislative, on the federal side came and asked, what is it you guys need? Unbeknownst, there was other conversations going. It was to expand our facility out at, what we call the barn or PD1. Basically add classrooms, add gym, add parking space. The city owns the land to the south, so there's room there to expand and turn it into a true regional training center where we can not only train our own, but bring the departments from the eastern part of the state in and maybe charge some money for that. That was a goal. I don't know where that's at right now. I know there's other discussions on other projects. Uh, but whoever we talked to was really excited about that. And hopefully that will go. But that would be great. And then it would allow us to turn officers out a lot quicker.
Okay, thank you. And just want to go around because I suspect everybody will have a question, or I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. But on that point, before we go, would there be costs associated with creating a Billings Academy that this body should be thinking about or know about?
Well, Mayor, I think it would be the same situation that the Chief Valdez warned or alerted the council in when they were going through their own academy, is that there may be an increased cost if we have to backfill for our instructors. In our situation, I'm not going to lose anybody for 8 months while we train someone. I need you to train firearms. I need somebody else to do driving. I need somebody else to do criminal investigation. So we're not going to lose somebody for a long period of time. But the potential to have to backfill, especially if we're not going to be up to staff because of these other numbers, a little bit of money there. But I think we'll make it back because I'm not paying $8,000 a head to send people to the academy room and board.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we just go clockwise here? Councilmember Rogers?
Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Kennedy?
Chief, one of the areas is, and you went through the numbers, how you're going to get up to 177. What's our ideal number then that we really need to get up to in the next 3 years?
Councilmember Kennedy, yes, I think that's a good number for us. Two things in play. First of all, CPSM recommendations, if you remember, is that we got enough personnel right now, with some adjustments on how we deliver service, which we are doing with the communication center and all that. Second of all would be the uncertainty coming out of the legislature. Is that if we lose funding, I wouldn't be able to hire those people anyway. And so, obviously we're looking at the budget impact on that. So based on those two things, and again, to get to 177, if all I can do is 21 a year, given the retirements, which have been in I'm going to say 10 to 15 retirements, attrition a year, it's going to take a little while to do that. But I think what's really going to help if we can go out on our own, we can turn those numbers out a lot faster.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Shaw?
Thanks, Chief. Is this on? Yeah, okay. Positive news. I always like hearing these reports, seeing and hearing plans for the future, looking forward in areas you're going to be focused on. This isn't last year, but it's this year. Do you want to talk at all about the upcoming Camp Blue? I know we've seen some donations come in for it, but I just want to give you a chance if you want to pitch that here, because I think that's an exciting thing for our community.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, council member. I don't know all the details of it, but essentially it is all the SROs will be putting on a week-long camp, I believe it is, for students in the district here. Hands-on, similar to a mini Citizens Police Academy, if you will. So they'll be messing around the equipment. They'll get instructions. Again, breaking down any barriers, opening up communications, trying to build those relationships. And again, that was the SROs unilaterally coming to me and saying, "What do you think?" And I was, absolutely. And then, as you're aware, you got a bunch of donations coming next week. So it's a good program.
It's exciting. I'd love to hear an update after it happens. Have somebody come and talk to us about it.
I tried to get in, but they wouldn't let me. Height requirement.
Very good. Councilor Roy?
Mayor, I have just a couple if that's all right.
Sure.
Chief, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get my notes incorrect. You said 400% increase in just reasonable apprehension charges, correct?
Correct.
And that's because we just hadn't been getting victim cooperation, hadn't been charging it. So this is significant.
That is correct. And again, low number. I mean, it's 55 this year and whatever 400% was going the other way. We had little or none last year.
But trending in the direction of officers having better training and victims more willing to cooperate with BPD.
Absolutely.
That's tremendous. So I ask this question every year, and I'm going to keep asking it until I really understand it. And I'm shifting away from PMFA now into the property crimes. Calls for service are down, thefts are down. I would say in general that's a good trend, but how do we know that people aren't just not calling on property crimes? Because I continue to hear from business owners in the community, from property owners, we've heard it here at council. We get break-ins all the time, but we don't call. We know the cops are busy. How do we sort of tease out what's an actual downward trend and what is people just saying, look, we know the jail's full. We know the cops are overworked. It's not really worth a call.
Yeah, well, I would say that they're doing a disservice to themselves. I can only report the numbers that I have. So of the thefts that were reported, we were down. I would give the same message to our citizens that hold that opinion as I did to the officers when they were frustrated with the jail, is that you need to do your job. Okay, you need to make arrests, you need to investigate, you need to try to get people in jail if you can, great if you can't. That's not your deal. But to throw your hands up and say it's not worth it is the wrong answer. And I will transcend that to the citizens to say, not calling us because they don't think anything's going to happen or nobody's going to go in jail, they won't be held accountable. That is not the right answer. If you want to be able to generate accurate numbers to see, if there's going to be a larger jail discussion at some point in time, having people that are going out, it doesn't make any difference, doesn't help. So you need to call, you need to get it documented. If they can't get in jail, again, that's not the citizens' issue. It's frustrating for them when their people are back. That's what we deal with. So I would say, don't take that attitude because it doesn't help the situation. The officers are going to respond where they're sent, when they're sent. So.
Thanks. And then my last question is you talked about the property damages due to traffic accidents. Do the CSOs ever respond to that, or is that always a sworn officer?
No, that's CSO. So their numbers are reflected in here as well. And so again, those low barrier calls where we don't need to send a sworn officer. Matter of fact, they are doing a lot of those property damage accidents. So no injuries, no DUIs and whatnot. They're going and handling those. And the same thing here. So a lot of those, if there's no suspects, witnesses, or evidence, and most of those are handled by CSOs.
And then just a comment to close. I love the training facility idea. I've told you that. I am very much for it. Will help in any way I can. I would ask that if it's possible to conceptualize a partnership with Billings Public Schools, that we do that. They continue to be supportive of a public safety career pathway. I think staff continue to participate in building that program out. So if we have a way to maybe do a little high school wing or something to that effect as we start to conceptualize this, I'd sure appreciate that. But in terms of what I think the right priorities are, that sort of local training center, I think makes a tremendous amount of sense. And just kudos to you and your team for raising it up.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, you got some good numbers here. I appreciate you and your staff really and the officers out there doing what they're doing. So thank you for that. There are some concerns up there as far as some of the some of these things, they're trending up. I just hope to see, a mid-report come up that shows how you've actually started bringing some of those down. But I agree with Councilmember Owen. The training ideas are a really good idea. Getting our students involved in the public safety area early as soon as possible would be great, including in some of the colleges and stuff. Bozeman's doing it maybe through their college. We've got some colleges here that can do the same kind of path. So it's a great idea. I look forward to hearing more about it, more specifics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Boyer.
Well, I'll be the hill in the pile here. Between 24th Street West and Grand and 5th Avenue on Grand Avenue today coming here, I could have written 26 citations. I think the public doesn't care anymore. The broken window theory is out. People don't care because they know nothing's going to happen. And I know your answer. You can't do anything about it. But it's just an observation that the public knows that nothing's going to happen. They speed. They do whatever they want, and it shows. And people come to Billings and say, well, these people are nuts. And we're allowing everything to happen. This is an observation from me. I know that the police department, you have 3 people for the size of this town, means nothing. And I never see a cop, truly, I'll drive them down Grand Avenue all the time, go to the West End. I never see a police officer. I never see a car anymore. So either they're really busy or I don't know what's going on, but just an observation. I think we're out of control for traffic, and the public knows that.
Councilor Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, actually, that's kind of what I wanted to get on to. You do notice that 5 of these most frequent crash intersections are in our ward. Right? It's the time of year we can sit out on our back patio and listen to the drag races on Shiloh. Listen to them on Central, on Grand, Monad, Broadway, they're all out there, right? The roads are designed for that. If you don't have the manpower to be out there enforcing the law, we need your leadership on the design aspect. Helping our community understand that we have to design roads that encourage lower speeds. And if your voice is silent there, the only option we have is to try to give you more manpower to do it. And we passed 2 levies, and part of your strategic goals out of those levies when you were going around giving all those great presentations was, we're going to do more traffic enforcement. And we're not seeing that after 4 years. Our numbers are exactly where they have been. So very disappointed on that traffic enforcement side of things. And I know domestic violence is more important, right? But we hear it all the time. And it is a quality of life issue when you can't sit out on your own backyard and enjoy this beautiful summer evening, because all you're hearing is drag races, and you're just waiting for that crash, that motorcycle that is going to be the next cross on the side of the road. I mean, we hear it, we live it every day. And so please get involved on the design aspect in the city. As we redesign Grand, as we redesign Rimrock, we need your voice there. We never should have allowed Monad to be extended west of Shiloh as an 80-foot wide speed strip. It's more dangerous now to cross Monad on the Shiloh path because people are flying down that because there's no traffic and we've got huge wide lanes. And it's just an open, pedal to the metal and go. So we need you on the design aspect. We need you at the state level, you and all your cohorts around the state saying, we've got to be able to have red light cameras. This is a safety issue. This is a law enforcement issue. This is everything. We need to be able to have this, at least at the city level. We need your voice in this because we just don't have the budget to just give you unlimited manpower to go out there and do it. So the cheaper, more effective ways to deal with it at the front end. So please do that. We need something. And this is the last time I'm going to be able to say this in one of your annual reports. Please get on this. We've got to have it. We can't stay silent on this anymore.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Gillick.
I think looking at the data, when you have some 10-year data, that's helpful to see sort of trends over time. I think it's really helpful if we get the per capita basis. Over a couple years, it's not a big deal, but since some of the data is over since 2015, so it's helpful to know kind of how we're trending in that regard. Also better for being able to compare to other communities as well. I mean, it's also nice to know the absolute too. So appreciate that. Thank you for putting together the report in the first place, and as well as your commentary. Yeah, I think you mentioned that roughly 50% or so of the rest stats were failure to appear, and so you mentioned the 72-hour hold that will help a lot, as well as jail expansion. That's really distorting our crime stats compared when people look at the stats for our community. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, council member, I would say it skews the arrest stats. So people just look at a total number of arrests. When you look at the specific charges of what they are, that's where you get it skewed.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so some good trends. I will also echo that we also in Ward 1 hear a lot of, because you can hear it all the way from the Central Avenue and Broadwater and whatnot. So I understand that's something we need more manpower to do that, and I know you're working on it, and I will add my voice to those wanting more effort there. But appreciate efforts that and successes elsewhere.
Good, thank you. Councilmember Tidswell? Thank you. Councilmember Ashmolider?
Not much in the way of question, just commentary. I mean, Chief, I appreciate your willingness to be responsive and answering questions and taking things as they come throughout the year, not just, when we pull you in front of council. I know I've reached out to you on a number of occasions about different things on the West End or different, concerns throughout the community. And I appreciate your responsiveness and you're quick to maybe not be able to solve the problem, but come back with a reasonable explanation and an answer. I think you guys have gotten a lot better over the last 2 years at really being engaged and forward about the situation, good or bad. The only comment I'd make is unfortunately in our family situation, we deal with the PFMA side and the parenting side of things, and that's our reality. So it's the real one for me. And from what we've experienced, your younger officers have taken that very seriously and done a very good job at being attentive. Their bedside manner, if that's what you want to call it, has been great. And they have served this community and at least in our experience very well. The experienced officers, I would say, to some extent, the guys with some rust on the belt have a little different approach to that. And it's not always great. And somehow we've got to be able to get from top to bottom, regardless of where you are at in your career, the same level of attentiveness, care, and concern in these family, parental, and PFMA domestic issues. That's still something we've got some work to do internally from my experience, but certainly doing a great job with the new folks coming into the agency from my experience. And how you deal with that, I don't have an answer for you, but there's still work to do with changing the attitude and the mindset of some of the experienced officers in the force. So thanks for your efforts this year.
Thank you. And Chief, I'll just comment on a couple items that were said, but first I want to just thank you. A coworker of mine was involved in a car accident on Friday, and he just was commenting to me just offhand how professional the female police officer was who responded to that. He didn't catch a name, but he had just had all sorts of praise for her, and I'm sure that story is repeated every day. So thank you, and thank you for your leadership. about a couple things that were said. One, on the issue of traffic enforcement. I think we all see it, so we all share that concern. Not to minimize Councilor Rupsis's comment about getting involved with the design, but that's of roadways. That's a long term goal, obviously. Short term, though, I do think there is some value to high visibility traffic enforcement, where you just pull out all of the cars available on a very high visible arterial and whatever that looks like, just to get attention, because it will increase confidence in the police department, and also maybe deter some of that. But it has to be highly visible, and it's a little showy, maybe, but it has a purpose. So I encourage you to think about that. The other thing I would encourage you to think about is cracking down on missing headlights. I play a little game with myself. Whenever I leave these meetings in the dark, it's a little harder to do this time of year. How many one-eyed bandits will I see coming at me? And by law, you have to have two headlights. And it's an obvious thing, easy thing to pull over. And I don't think I've ever driven home without seeing somebody with one headlight. So, and then getting that message out to the public. Hey, we're just going to give you warnings maybe for the first time, but that's an important issue. Again, it's important to have two headlights, but it's also important for people to know that something that's so visible will not be ignored. So on that item. And then the last thing, appreciate the mention of Camp Blue. And I would just put in a pitch, and I'm happy to work on this, finding some way to reach out to young kids who are Native American, because we do need natives on our police force. And we know that we're going to have to break a dynamic and get very young Native kids interested in law enforcement and being first responders. And we've got to start young. And so Greg Stout at BIA has been very willing to get involved with that. We sure appreciate his efforts. So if I can help in any way with coordinating those sorts of efforts, just please let me know. What haven't we hit? Anything else you want to comment on there?
No, Mayor, I appreciate all the comments and the observations. We see it, hear it, understand where you're coming from. The only thing I would disagree with is that, yes, we can do something about it. It's just a matter of our capacity. And so we'll work, no excuses, hear you loud and clear. So that's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rogers did have an item.
Yeah, just looking back over the accidents by time of day, I thought it was really interesting that most of the accidents are happening between 2 and 5. You would think that it would be after work when the rest of us is there some similar line graph like this that shows the ages of the participants? Is this high school students getting off? Do you have any idea?
No, we do not have that that dynamic. That would be my guess, is that we introduce the young drivers in mass.
And do you know if that's a nationwide kind of trend
I
time-wise,
don't.
or is this?
I don't know. I would assume the same as you, that you'd get the rush hour where you have issues.
Thank you. Councilor Bernice?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Chief, there's something you mentioned that we didn't touch on. My concern is you mentioned the increase in assaults on the police officers, and just wanted to hear how you're addressing that, making sure, and if you need anything from council, make sure that officers have what they need, because they want to make sure they're protected. I know not too long ago you got shields for all the officers. They carry, and there's like things like that. I want to make sure that we're providing the tools that they need to ensure their safety, and what you're doing to help with that.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate the question. We work very hard on making sure that our officers are safe in our tactics and equipment. You and the citizens have given us pretty much the very best. It's expensive, but it pays dividends across the board. We also spend a great amount of time on defensive tactics, ground fighting, things like that. So we're pretty well versed in wrestling and all that type of stuff, where we don't have to immediately go to deadly force. We have other tools. So again, supporting the tasers, our pepper spray is used occasionally. The one thing that was presented in our upcoming budget is we want to have enough less lethal shotguns, beanbag rounds, if you will, for all of our cars. Right now, we have a couple per shift. And so what happens is that we have to call for it. If it's not involved in the incident per se, we have to wait until it shows up and do whatever. I will tell you that it has been used countless times over the past couple of years, and it has saved lives, both officers and citizens. Because we had an intermediate step before going to deadly force, where before we didn't have anything. Very, very effective. That's one thing I would really like to do. Again, provide more tools that give our officers less lethal options rather than going from here to here with nothing in between. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, I think we'll turn it over to the other, well, we want to open up for public comments, so don't go away. Let's do that. There's an opportunity for public comment on this item. If anybody would like to comment on the annual report from the Billings Police Department, please come to the podium. I just ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Is there any comment on item number 4? Any public comment on item 4 before we close the public comment period?
Mayor, while I'm waiting for everybody to line up there, I forgot to mention that in our calls for service were welfare checks, suicide threats. Those were down 8%. And that is by and large to our partnership with the fire department and crew. I know we didn't have them the whole year, but in the short time that we did, it made a significant difference. And I know you're working on solutions there. Again, purely self-serving on my part. It makes a difference on what we can do. So support the fire department on their efforts. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Chief. We'll close the public comment period. Before we turn over, Chris?
Yeah, just as Chief Valdez swaps out here, if I could just thank the chief. This is not necessarily the last time we'll see the chief at this meeting, but he's not a regular
the chief in white
on Monday nights. Yeah, Chief Valdez. So just last week finalized for him, and good for him. A loss for us. Mountain View Fire Rescue out of the Denver area has taken on the chief to become their chief. So after 26 and a half years of service to Billings, this will be Chief Valdez's last annual report to this group and to this community, which obviously with 26 plus years of service, he's dedicated a tremendous amount of his time, his family, weekends, holidays, all the things that you do as a first responder to our community. So I just want to thank him for that service to us. Number of things he accomplished. One, I just want to highlight real quick that I don't think people necessarily appreciate enough is independently we're rated by the insurance industry. It ebbs and flows. ISO is what it's kind of referred to. Billings on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is as good as you can get. 10 is you've got no service, and this department moved from a 3 to a 2 under his leadership. So particularly in the commercial side of the equation, you typically see some real cost savings to businesses who are paying for insurance. We all know what's been going on in the insurance industry the last many years. So, and that's not without homeowner improvements as well, but obviously a real indication of the quality of service that is being delivered to our citizens under Chief Valdez's leadership. So, like I said, we'll turn the mic over to him, but very much appreciate. We've got just a few weeks left. I think most of the rest of the month. Is that right? Yeah. The end of April. So with that, Chief. Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you for your service. Obviously, we wish you the very best going forward. Their gain, our loss.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Thank you, Chris, for that. It has been an absolute honor and privilege to serve you and the community of Billings. I've been here 31 years. Like Chris said, I've been here 26 and a half serving Billings. I'm going to miss it. It's been great. I'm really going to miss the professional firefighters that we have. They are the gold standard, in my opinion, and want to do the same with where I'm going. And so, yeah, it's going to be tough, but I'm also excited about the new challenges ahead as well. So thank you very much for allowing me to serve as your chief. Appreciate it.
Our privilege.
Okay. The 2024 annual report for the Billings Fire Department. 2024 was a challenging year where we basically had to regroup, and especially towards the end of the calendar year. We focused on replenishing our ranks and even adding personnel to meet operational demands. Unfortunately, we had to mothball the crew program and then also cut some training. However, on the positive side, we did create new partnerships within our community and other areas of need while opening another station for greater response capability. Thank you. In 2023 was a slight decline in calls for service. That was attributed to dispatching protocols and new service agreement with AMR to respond to basic life support calls without a response from fire. Approximately 500 to 600 calls for service went to AMR alone. In our previous system, we would have responded as well, contributing to our overall total. Unfortunately and inexplicably, in 2024, experienced another increase in calls for service. Just as a side note, in 2023, we actually had a decrease in total calls for service, but we had an increase in units deployed. And then you can flip that in 2024. And what that indicates to us is that there was much more demand for the lower acuity type of calls, which is where our MRTs came in handy for those types of calls. And EMS continues to dominate our focus. As we all know, we have implemented 2 new programs, the MRTs and the crew, to help alleviate pressure on the entire public safety system. But the demand for services in this category is and will continue to keep rising. Pure EMS, there's what you're seeing on the slide there, those are pure EMS calls. And what I mean by that is there's a distinct difference as they're not tied to a traumatic event, such as a motor vehicle accident with extrications, hazmats, or rescues of that nature. These are purely EMS, your heart attacks, your strokes, things of that nature. So these require an advanced life support or high acuity type calls categorized as Charlie, Delta, and Echo, which necessitates a response from BFD. It's also important to note that we had a total of 437 ride-ins to the hospital. That's a 12.6% increase over 2023. And why that statistic is important is that every time one of our firefighters rides into the hospital, we have to take a unit out of service, whether that's a squad or an engine. That's a big no-no for us. This was one of the many EMS ordinance issues that we discussed during the last council retreat, and is currently under review as our service agreement with AMR is set to expire at the end of July. And I don't know what happened to the bars on my bar graph, but we have the numbers. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So on the top right, as you can see those numbers up there, you can see the Station 5 is by and far the busiest fire station we have. We actually run 2 units out of Station 5 on 24th Street West, and that's Engine 5 and Squad 2. Squad 2 actually handled 2,790 calls, while Squad 1 ran 1,872 calls, for a total of about 24% of our total calls for service. So they are absolutely doing what they need to be doing and what they were designed to do. Then you can see stations 7 and 8 are the lowest calls for service. And station 7, while it's our largest run area, has the lowest volume, or lowest population, I should say, but has the longest travel time, turnaround time, and response times as well. And then with Station 8, to note there, while it only says 707, it's important to remember that Station 8 did not open until May of 24. And then the lower left slide was supposed to indicate.
The next slide.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Perfect. Little glitch there. That lower left slide was supposed to indicate, and we touched on it a little bit with Chief St. John as well, that 2 to 5 time frame for the last 3 decades since we've been keeping track of that. It remains consistent to be our busiest time. And we can only guess that it's just the end of the day, end of the workday and end of the school day. People get into stuff or stress-related type incidences. False alarm violations. So false alarm ordinance was approved by council in December of 21. Ordinance 21-5787 allows the Billings Fire Department to charge businesses where suppression crews respond to numerous false alarms. The fees charged to alarm system owners are intended as a deterrent and a mechanism to reduce false alarms. For 23, the second full calendar year of operation, we recorded 562 alarms. And in 24, we recorded 633 alarms, which is a 12.6% increase from last year. But you can see in January, there was quite the spike, and that was due to frozen pipes, basically. And then next year, whomever's giving the report will pretty much be able to tell you the same thing because January, February of 25, we had that deep freeze. So you'll probably see the same thing there. We experienced, notably false alarms in 24 resulted just shy of 50,000 in fines. And in 23, it was 45,500 on that. And just for your information, the alarm owners get 2 strikes before they get fined. And on the third one, they'll get a fine, which is $250. Our 911 center. Our 911 center probably experienced the most growth this last calendar year. They experienced significant upgrades in software, hardware, and protocols to enhance the efficient deployment of all public safety agencies in the county. Our centers purchased new radio equipment to enhance police and fire departments' communication capabilities. We've also updated our protocols to a new EFD, emergency fire dispatching, and EPD, emergency police dispatching systems. They're nationally recognized and vetted by major public safety organizations across the country. We updated all cybersecurity measures for our phone system to enhance the center's resistance to cyber attacks and improve resilience. Additionally, a new logging system was implemented to better comply with state regulations. And sadly, we did lose our 911 manager in July, but also happy to say we just tendered an offer last Thursday and should have someone in place to go middle of next month. So with all that doom and gloom that I've just been talking about, it wasn't all a bad year for us. The BFD was fortunate enough to establish 2 major partnerships that have greatly enhanced and elevated our citizens' service level. In April, a partnership between BPD and BFD was formed, known as the SWAT Medic program. This represents an efficient use of resources pulled together, resulting in effective law enforcement and advanced medical care on site, on scene, and in the hot zones. In July, another partnership was formed with our state's Army National Guard. This is an enhanced search and rescue system that is actually the first of its kind in our region. While we have access to air support for local emergencies, the focus is on a much broader area of service. And the use of our medics coupled with airlift capabilities is to serve all of eastern Montana and Wyoming at very little expense. So in summary, 2024 proved very challenging for our organization, but we remain steadfast and resilient in the face of these challenges. We also saw and capitalized on a few opportunities. 2 new partnerships, the support from our council to help us with our overtime issues, and many new technological upgrades and advancements to remain the clear-cut leader in our PSAP and deployment and coordination capabilities. End of report.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Questions, Council? Councilor Asperlander, we started over here with me last time, so why don't we start with you and we'll go this direction.
Yeah, just one quick one, Chief. Are we on a reimbursement program with the National Guard, you know, taking our services out to Eastern Montana, Northern Wyoming, or how does that, is that an opportunity more so than anything for our firefighters? How does
Right.
that work?
Right now, as we speak, no, we are not. But with all the equipment that we were able to get was all grant and donation based. The training is all straight time, so we're not using any overtime for that. And that was a cost of, let's see, $1,400 since July for all the training. Now, we are working with all the eastern counties as the sheriff departments are in charge of search and rescue. They're looking at putting funding into an account for that reimbursement. Figure, you know, once this thing is up and fully operational for full training and being dispatched or deployed, probably costs roughly $3,000 to $5,000 a year.
Okay. To be clear, like, I think that's great. I think it's great for opportunities for your team. I think it's a great service to provide with, you know, the specialized folks that we're fortunate to have on our department. Be curious as, you know, your replacement comes through to just keep a finger on how this is actually working, what deployments are looking like, and how this is working itself out and playing itself out. I think it's a great partnership. I applaud you for pulling this together. Good ability for us as Billings and the leader in our state to help the eastern counties and the more rural areas that just don't have our capabilities. So kudos to you and your team for pulling that together.
I appreciate that. This has been 9 years in the making. It's taken a long time, you know, all the federal red tape that comes with it. And as I stated before, Wyoming approached us and asked for our services. So we are actually on a call out for the state of Wyoming if they need us. I also had a classmate of mine in the Naval Postgraduate School who's the Adjutant General of Nevada, who waited for this program to be implemented and is basically taking the playbook and copying it as well. So we're very proud of this. Like I said, it's cost the city very little, but has added a tremendous amount of, it's another tool in our toolbox, but a large tool, so to speak.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Tidswell.
Any staffing challenges, issues right now?
No, not right now. The 7 that you graciously granted us last fiscal year just started last Monday. So we'll be at full tilt. No, knock on wood, we're not seeing any retirements right now or any type of attrition. So we'll be up to full, like I said, full tilt, and we fully expect to keep our OT budget within that $500,000 mark.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Gillick?
Thanks, Chief. So it sounds like with the false alarms that the fines aren't a sufficient deterrent at this point. Is that safe to say? Do you know, I don't know if you're surveying people or whatnot? I mean, is it just that they're just happy to pay the fine and just keep on doing it? Or you know, do we need to raise the fine, do you think? Is that something you recommend for us to do?
Great question, and yes, short answer, I do recommend that we change that. I know in the past we've discussed like a progressive type of fine, and it is actually written in the ordinance, so it wouldn't take much change on council's part to move that forward. There are some very big players in the sandbox where it just doesn't phase them. They'll rack up 10, 12, 15 of these and then just cut us a check. So not working as far as those bigger players are concerned. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Councilor Ripsis?
No questions, Mayor, but just wanted to thank you, Chief, for your service to our community and wish you and your family all the best down in Colorado.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, wish you well. Come back if you need something. I was just looking at
Something.
station number 5. What do you think that issue is 5, station 5? Is it because we're growing so far west and so far south? Any recommendations going forward? What are we going to do with station 5?
Oh, that, you've heard me say in the past, there's no question, you're going to need to look at a Station 9. Last year alone, we did basically a ghost or a test site, if you will, in CAD, where if there was a Fire Station 9, they would have had close to 1,800 calls on their own. So 7 and 5 are splitting those duties, running out there. So that's in addition to 5 is unique because it has a little bit of everything. I can tell you that, the Heights is a bedroom community for us, which presents unique challenges. But you go to 5, it's got a major railroad, a major freeway, bigger buildings, a lot more industry, all the residences out there, plus a big chunk of the BUFSA. So it's got a little bit of everything, and so 5 is very busy.
Thank you. Councilor Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I'd like everyone to say welcome, or thank you for being your service here. I'm sure the community's going to love you there. We
Thank
are
you.
going to miss you here. So it was great to know you the short time that we did know you here as Chief. So thank you.
Likewise.
I agree. I'm glad that the fines were brought up because I think that's something we need to move to. You before you leave, I would hope to have you some type of written recommendation of where those fines should go because you're familiar with it. You've been dealing with it, and so I would appreciate that. And by the way, where do those fines go? Do they just go to the general fund of the fire department? Okay.
Yeah, we don't have them earmarked.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I agree this new partnership you have with the garden, that is, I think that's great. It's thinking outside the box. It's hopefully you won't pull any of these well-trained firefighters that you've done over to Colorado with you, but I think one of the things you mentioned is it's a little cost. Anytime it's a little cost to us for something that I want to make sure, I mean, it's being utilized within the city of Billings. Now it sounds to me like this is more of a remote out of city rescue that is being done, which is great to offer, but I don't think we should be paying the bill at all. And it sounds to me like it's a highly desired service, and we would make sure that that's being well paid for and compensated for, not just the training, but also all the time and the resources. And even though it's equipment that was grant funded, it's going to have to be replaced. And so all of that stuff should be looked at as when we're talking to the state of Wyoming wants us to come out there, that's great. Maybe there's a monthly service fee they pay for us being on call for that kind of thing to make sure that we're able to keep that equipment going and operating and the staff up to training. So those are the kind of things we want to make sure that, and it sounds like you spent 9 years developing this. There's a whole development cost that in a business you would recoup over that time. So whatever that initial overall cost to the city taxpayers were on developing this program, that's something we'd also want to look to make sure that what is that fee structure to some of these eastern counties in Wyoming. So I don't know if you're the only one who's been involved in that, but that's the kind of thing we want to make sure that we have so that we understand what that appropriate fee structure should be to these organizations. But I think that's a great program that you've got started. So thank you. And I don't know if there's anything you want to comment towards some of that as far as the fees, but make sure we're covering that.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. This was a total team effort. Stayed in contact with the general and the colonel, the SAO up in Helena. A lot of back and forth. I can tell you that we are turning over every stone to ensure that this is sustainable and not on the taxpayers' dime. That's why we kept it to as low a cost as possible. We wanted to just get it up and going, make sure it worked, and then you know, it's kind of that thing where you kind of prove it a little bit to see and then go, okay, now there's a cost to it. I can tell you that how this was born, I was a brand new battalion chief. I'd been the chief like maybe a week, and we had a river rescue. It got dark. It was the river was raging, and I wouldn't allow any of my folks to go on the river. So we were out of options, and I swore that that would never happen again. And so that's where this program came from. And so now we have that lift capability. Should that ever happen again, hope it never does, but now it's there. So.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Councilman Rowland.
Thanks, Mayor. Oh, Chief, I'm so sad you're leaving because I was so looking forward to us celebrating the full staffing of Fire Station 8, which you have just been a tremendous leader on getting us that second fire station in the Heights. We got that building a little faster than we had expected. And so when we had first started talking about a second fire station in the Heights, you had said that maybe 3 years or so would be about when that was ready for a full sort of battalion. Based on what you know now, like let's set funding uncertainties aside, but based on just what you know in terms of calls for service, staffing needs, priorities, when do you think we need to be planning to fully staff stations in the Heights?
If I had my way now.
Today.
Yes, absolutely. I've made no qualms about that, and I feel the same about the West End as far as Station 9 goes. We are 2 stations behind as far as I'm concerned. We have the physical location, the second one in the Heights. It just needs to be staffed and fully functional. At this point, we were just in survival mode and trying to make sure that we were operationally sound and not blowing the overtime budget out of the park again. And so we wanted to get that under control, but absolutely, 8 is primed and ready to go. Just needs people.
That's helpful. And then since you won't be here for the annual budget grilling, what do you see as the future of the MRTs? Do we need to be thinking about expanding those, growing them? Can you give us your input on that?
Yes, great question. Absolutely. Those have been, you've heard me say it before, wildly successful. Absolutely love those things. They are utility wagon, if you will. They can do it all. They don't have the capabilities of an engine, but when you need that extra help, they're there if they're not on a medical call. And so when we have the 460 some odd ride-ins, we much prefer they come off those squads and not an engine company. And so that's been the case most of the time for us, which has been great. Again, keeping down the wear and tear on those expensive pieces of equipment, the fuel costs coming down, all of that. It's a win across the board. But absolutely, I would say 1 for every 2 engines in this community would be the perfect balance. Yep.
Good. Councilor Bergeron.
Thank you.
Member Kennedy.
Chief, I'm sorry to see you go. Good luck in the future. The one area that I have some concerns on, I'm happy to hear that the 7 positions now you have hired and ready to go. But the one area is the condition of the fire stations. We've heard over and over again that there are problems. You have equipment that's not working. It's not been the best environment. They've deteriorated. How do we plan on going forward with that?
Again, another great question. So that during the budget and finance committee, that was going to be what you heard me talk about mostly. We prioritize in the fire service. It's people, fleet, then facilities. We got the people. We feel comfortable with our fleet, and we're ready to attack facilities. We've identified stations 1, 2, 3, and 5 as critical. There's some major infrastructure issues from foundations to plumbing to electrical. Need some major overhauls. And I was hoping to come at you with a 5-year plan to work on 1 station at a time for major renovation, if you will. You could handle all 4 of those stations and extend their lives by 30, 40, 50 years with some good renovations and infrastructure work for the cost of one brand new fire station. So that was going to be what you heard me come with. Yep.
Very good, thank you. Councilor Rogers?
Because we had heard earlier from our public comment talking about the jaws of life issue, I just wondered, I see that you have, what is this, 56 extractions? Yeah, or extrications. I just wondered, are those generally jaws of life type things? How often are you guys utilizing that equipment?
So extrication, the definition of extrication is removing someone from a dangerous environment. And so that could be simply just opening a door that someone thought was jammed. Our folks just go up and open the door. That's considered an extrication. As far as using the actual tool itself, I don't have that number for you, but I can actually, I can find out for you and get that to you.
Curious. Yeah, and then I was going to ask about the deferred maintenance as well.
Chief, I got a question about response time. So page 9 of the staff report has a breakdown by station of average response times from the low station 2, 5 minutes, 39 seconds, to station 7 on the high end, 8 minutes and 21 seconds. Down at the bottom of that page, there's a note that says it's the Billings Fire Department's goal to maintain an average response time of 4 minutes, which is significantly less than any of those, meaning the time between incident dispatch and the arrival time of our first unit. This is an industry standard established by the National Fire Protection Association, and one that we've lost sight of. So my question is, it's great to have aspirational goals, and apparently there's some sort of a industry standard of 4 minutes. But how meaningful is that really when compared to actual result, or even how we compare relative to other similar departments across the country? In other words, do you know what the median response time is for a community of our size? Maybe we're doing better than most. I don't know.
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of those times have generated from the East, and those, the East is much more heavily concentrated than what we are out here in the West. Secondly, those times take into consideration the BUFSA, which raises our times up tremendously, especially 7, because it has quite the jaunt to get down into 9's area, down by Costco and such, if 5 isn't available. 5 is the same. And so those are your outliers, right? Is it realistic that we would ever hit those numbers? Well, we'd have to double the size of our force to be able to hit those numbers. As a fire chief, am I ever going to back down and not try to reach that? No. We're always going to try to hit that if we possibly can. That's the same as the ISO thing. I've heard before, isn't 2 good enough? No, it's not. I'm always going to try to get after a 1. And so where I'm going with that is yeah, I don't know that it's realistic to ever hit those numbers, but we're certainly going to continue to try. As far as the value in a response time, I'll give you one example. The saying goes, time is muscle. If an individual in your family is having a heart attack, every second counts. And so that is why that response time is so important. That's why there's so much more emphasis put on getting to an individual. If someone's trapped in a burning building, time is of the essence, right? And so, yeah, there is a high value one time.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone around the table. I don't know if there's anything else before we will have an opportunity for public comment in just a second. Councilor Gillick.
Following up on the mayor's question, then with the MRTs, does that help us reduce our response times?
Yes, it absolutely has. The MRTs, they do cover, while we try to never cross over into other districts, because it just it doesn't set well with any of us if a MRT goes screaming past a fire station and there's an engine sitting in the station. But we try to keep them localized. But yes, they have been very effective. They're smaller, quicker. But lost my train of thought where I was going with that. But yes, overall, they have been helpful, to answer your question. Absolutely.
Okay, Chris?
Chief, or Mayor and Council, I just wanted to, and if the Chief would just correct me if I'm wrong, just to be clear. So the great news, as the Chief said, is we got those 7 additional people who started training last week. So, this year's budget, these guys have worked diligently with finance and admin to live within what we have for payroll and overtime together. The idea of being 500,000 or below in OT costs, that'll come in next year's budget because these 7 additional folks will be on staff actually responding to calls for service. So for the remainder of this year, they'll be in their training. I think they come on sometime in June.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilor Renese?
Yeah, Mayor, just a quick clarification, Chief. Yeah, the response time, did I hear you say that then the report includes the BUSFA time?
Yes.
Okay, is there a report that you can provide to us that shows the difference between the city and the BUSFA? Because I think for the city residents, I mean, that's who the fire department's for. We want to know what our response time is for the city.
Yes.
It's great that we're helping the county out and they're paying for it, but let's find out what our response time is for the city. And maybe if that could be an annual report, city versus BUSFA, that would be helpful. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely.
Very good. Councilor Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. As long as we're asking for data. Nothing in here breaks out the numbers of MRT calls and how they're, what calls and what areas they're responding to. So I think that would be helpful instead of just having just general incidents per station. How many of those are responded to by MRTs versus engines? Me, I think would be.
I believe that was.
Was it?
Yeah.
I missed it.
Yeah, so the MRTs, Squad 2, sorry. Squad is the name of the unit. That's Squads 1 and 2 make up the MRT program. And so Squad 2 ran 2,790 calls on its own. And Squad 1, ran 1,872. So when you combine those, they ran 24%.
Are those are, I'm sorry. I just did a search on Squad 2 and couldn't.
Oh, sorry, we didn't, my apology. No, we did not break that out on the full report. My apology. But I do have it in the notes here. Be happy to get you more information that you're looking for, but that's the breakout for. And 3,862 calls. So if you break out, 2,790 of those, that was the squad itself.
So out of that 3,800, 2,700 was MRT.
Correct.
That's really important information.
Yep.
But it was only Station 5 that was affected. They would have.
Well, so
would have done all kinds of West End stuff.
yeah, so Squad 1, while it has its own assignment, it has its own station because we don't have an engine at Station 8. So we placed Squad 1 there.
Okay, so everything in 8 was
Squad 1, yes. Yep. And it took some of the pressure off of both engines 1 and 6.
Okay, and then 2,700 out of the 3,800 of Station 5.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Let's have some public comment. If anybody would like to comment on item number 5, our fire department annual report, this is your opportunity. Please come to the podium. Is there any public comment on item number 5? Any public comment on item number 5 before I close the public comment period? No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment period on item number 5. Council, if there's nothing else, we will move on to our final regular item, our airport authority discussion. Airport Director, Transit Authority, Jeff, thank you for being here tonight. Sorry you're last on the pecking order here. Don't take it personally, please.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it was.
He didn't say pecking order. That's not, he didn't mean it that way.
to you about governance models and how commercial service airports are governed in the United States. Pulling up the presentation here. So this is the agenda that the items that I'll talk about specifically when I talk about airport governance options and transitioning to an airport authority and what that might look like for the city of Billings and Billings Logan International Airport. So in the United States, there are two general governance models that are utilized for commercial service airports or public airports. There's the government department, which BIL is a city government department. And those government departments can be at multiple levels. They can be at the city level, county level, state level, any of those organizations that own and operate an airport from a state or lower government agency. The other is independent airport authorities or authorities. Those are the primary options for the United States. Those items that are listed or models that are listed below the orange line are used internationally primarily. However, we do have a few examples in the United States. Some of those examples are general aviation airports that are very small, and the city government does not have the resources to operate their own airport, although they do have one. Oftentimes, a private entity like a fixed-based operator would come in and would operate the airport under a contract situation. But those numbers are very small. If you look at the definition of an airport authority, we have two types of airport authorities. There is the pure airport authority or the single mode authority, and that's an authority that just has an airport or multiple airports within the authority structure. Then there's the port authority. The port authority is multimodal. That means it has more than just airports. It has some other mode of transportation. Ports, harbors, rail, transit, all of those can be incorporated into port authorities. And so when we talk about authorities or airport authorities, I'm also referring to the potential for a multimodal port authority. Here are some of the benefits, if you will, of the different modes of airport governance in the U.S. About 55% of U.S. airports fall under the government-owned and operated category. Most of those are general aviation airports. They're smaller airports that do not have scheduled passenger service. So they're the ones that have private individuals or business aircraft type operations. Those are the bulk of the government-owned and operated airports. There are some larger airports like ours and some other city and county airports that are commercial service airports, but they are the minority within the government-owned and operated. Some of the benefits of government-owned and operated, of course, are the ability to use other departments' resources if there is an issue that overwhelms the capacity of the airport. Contracting and purchasing support that can be spread across multiple departments within an organization to save resources. Access to restricted grants that are only available to municipal governments. There are some federal grants in particular, and even state grants, that are only available to municipal governments. And then increased job security primarily for the leadership, the non-union members of a government-owned and operated airport. And the only reason I include that in there is that when we talk about the different structures, airport authorities have the ability to be very flexible. And when we're talking about leadership, we often see people that will gravitate to one governance model versus another.
Airport authorities, about 40% of U.S. airports are airport authorities. The bulk of those are commercial service airports with scheduled service or are large cargo airports. So they have a significant amount of air cargo operations. Once an airport reaches the border between non-hub and small hub category, that's at about the 1 million passenger range per year. That's when airports typically really significantly start to look at becoming an airport authority if they already aren't. In Montana, most of the commercial service airports are airport authorities, even smaller ones than Billings. If you look at the number of commercial service airports we have, all are airport authorities except for West Yellowstone, which is a seasonal commercial service airport. It's only open for part of the year, and it's a state-owned and operated airport. It's run by the State Department of Aeronautics. And then ours as a city airport. We're the only city-owned commercial service airport in the state of Montana. Some of the benefits, airport authorities tend to function more efficiently, meaning that they have the ability to operate with more flexibility in business practices, and the decision-making is more at the airport rather than the city government level. Airport authorities can form business-to-business relationships. Even though they are a quasi-government entity, they still have the ability to form business relationships that municipal airports or government-owned airports are not allowed to do in many cases. They tend to be more responsive to industry and economic changes. And again, that kind of goes back to the flexibility and the ability of the airport authority to make decisions fairly quickly. And then they have the flexibility to reward employees for performance. Again, that kind of goes back to the leadership. There are some leaders that gravitate toward airport authorities because of the performance-based compensation that occurs within airport authorities. And those are generalities, but those are typically what are considered to be the overall benefits of one type of governance model versus the other. You will see that there, on the airport authority side, many of the decisions that are made specifically looking at the airport and not at the broader political, looking at broader political impacts of the decisions that are made, meaning that you can have some decisions that might be made that a government-owned and operated airport would not necessarily allow or would have a restriction for. Some of those are things like if a hiring freeze is placed on a local government because of revenue available to the local government. If you have an authority, that hiring freeze does not carry over to the authority because it is an independent entity. Other things that might come up are things like promotion restrictions or limits that might be placed by a government authority, government-owned and operated airport would not necessarily be carried over to the independent entity that is the airport authority. When we talk about the airport authority and a potential for a transition process, Montana code allows for a very easy process for transitioning from a municipal or government-owned model to an airport authority. And that's why most of the commercial service airports transitioned soon after the state of Montana passed the statute that allowed airport authorities to be developed. And so you'll see that Many of those were done in the 1970s and early 1980s. Billings did not make that transition at that time, of course. The transition process, as it's laid out in 67-11 in the Montana Code, is listed here. Essentially, what we would do as an airport is we would bring in a consultant on board that their primary function is to establish airport authorities. There are consultant firms out there that's a big part of their overall business. They would draft the requiring establishing resolutions for the authority. They would conduct the required public meetings and then prepare a transition plan. And then you can read the remaining list of things that would occur with the assistance of the consultant. Now, in the staff memo, I put not to exceed $1 million. That's, again, there's a lot of things that can be included in the transition process that a consultant would be willing to do. But as we know, consultant fees have tended to go up recently. And so we would be very judicious about what we included in that scope of work. But some of the things that they would look at are single jurisdiction versus multi-jurisdictional recommendation. Single jurisdiction meaning the city would be the establishing authority, and they would appoint all of the members of the required board or commission that oversees the authority. Multi-jurisdiction would be adding other government entities like a county. An example is the Flathead County and the city went together and passed joint resolutions. And so it is a multi-jurisdictional airport authority. There are some that are just one government entity. And that would be a decision that would be made by this body as the primary authority. Benefits of going multi-jurisdictional is you have greater public and political support for the airport authority. You have the potential, depending on how the establishing resolution is written, for potential revenue sources. Things like adding a county mill as a potential for funding for the airport authority. Again, that would be all part of the recommendation that would come before the city council during that transition process. Another would be whether it's single mode or multimodal, whether it's just an airport authority or you add other modes. One example would be to potentially add the transit system to the authority. So a transit system, as we see it today, could remain a city entity even after the airport became an authority. Could establish an urban transportation district and fall under the MPO as the primary government entity that is responsible for the transit authority, or could be added to the authority. So there's different multimodal potential for an airport authority. Let's see. So this is the Montana Code, annotated, Title 67. If you'd like to have any interest in taking a look at that, it's basically broken out into 4 parts. One is the overall organization and general provisions, which I've covered some of those. The powers of the authority and the board or commission that's established to oversee it. And the way that board or commission is established in Montana statute is individuals would be appointed and they would serve as an independent board or commission, minimum of 5 members, whether that's single jurisdictional or multi-jurisdictional, a 5-member minimum. And they would have the power to make decisions for the airport authority. They would hire a CEO or director, typically it's referred to as a CEO, because it is very similar to a corporate structure. But they would be the decision-making body or the independent authority. Finances, again, are laid out, different types of finance options. As I mentioned, one of those would be to add the ability to collect mills. Another is eminent domain authority that could be transferred to an authority. And then extraterritorial airports, that's primarily looking at cross-jurisdictional, primarily states that are next to each other that might have a common airport. Examples are New York and New Jersey, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, or the Texarkana Airport Authority, which is Texas and Arkansas both appoint members to the commission. Again, I just included some of the details here. I'm not going to go through all of those. Talks about the different structures, authorities, and powers of the commissioners, and then the functions that can be awarded or assigned to the authority from the local government. What municipalities can do to support an airport. This is where there's discussion about a portion of taxes or funding can be provided to the airport. Other resources can also be given over to the airport. One of the things that the consultant will also do would be, in part of that transition plan, would be to clearly define what are the airport authority's assets. Most of the resources at the airport, land, equipment, structures, those were all paid for by either airport generated or federal funding that has come specifically to the airport. So most of that would be fall under the airport authority. That's typically what you'll see transitioned to the airport authority from the government-owned operation. And then last slide is just, again, it lays out some specifics of what the authority roles can be. These are not all encompassing, but an authority can take on these types of requirements. With that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Very thorough. Much appreciated. Very informative. Let's just do questions kind of randomly. I'll throw out the first one, which was appreciate putting a price tag, $1 million on the whole process. That to me would seem premature. The first question is this a good idea or a bad idea? And I would think we ought to be able to get to that answer for a lot less than $1 million. Just looking at what you were going through, but in more detail and with better analysis, comparison to other organizations, other cities, the cost-benefit analysis. Do you agree? You're nodding your head, so I think so. If we want to go down this path, what would that cost, and what would that process look like of purely focused on the whether to do this, not how to do this question?
Certainly, and yes, you can certainly break up the consultant's efforts to a cost benefit versus the actual transition process. I have no idea what the cost benefit would be at this time, cost for a consultant to come on board to do that. I would reach out to consultant firms that I've worked with in the past and get a general idea of what those costs may be. I would come back and present that cost to the city council. And then if you would like me to move forward with that, certainly can do that.
Would you agree, though, that's a logical first step if we even want to go down this path?
That is a first step. I'm not going to say it's the only step. I mean, we could make the decision to bring the consultant on board to go through the entire process and then make that decision, or you can do the cost benefit analysis.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Other Questions, Councilmember Owen, Councilmember Gulick, Councilmember Rasmussen?
Any concerns about essential air service under this model? Any
Not-
changes?
Not at all.
Okay.
We serve as an essential air service hub, so the essential air service decisions are not our decisions to make, and USDOT does not come to us and ask us for input in that process.
You had mentioned kind of early in the process that there may be some grants that you wouldn't be eligible for. You've probably looked at those way more than anybody has. Are they ones where the city and airport authority can apply together, or can the city pass through? And has this in any way hampered all of the other Montana airports that are already authorities?
I would say that there are some grants that an airport authority could go after, but typically when you get to this small hub size or larger, those grants are no program entitlements are much larger for the larger airports. So those types of grants become less and less important.
So I will tell you that my personal opinion is we should just move forward with the full consultant proposal and let's just get this done. You've done a very nice job here of being pretty balanced, and these are the pros and these are the cons. Do you have any major red flags that would necessitate us being more cautious?
I do not. Montana's process is very easy. We have airport authorities that are busier airports than Billings, and we have airport authorities that are much less busy passenger-wise and air cargo-wise than Billings Airport. All of those have operated for decades without significant difficulties.
So I guess my preference, Mayor, would be that we just move forward fully.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Gulick.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning some of the benefits of it being city-owned, and so one was potentially grants. And you also mentioned
That I've seen over my career are aircraft accidents. When an aircraft accident happens at an airport, it can be a very dramatic event, obviously, and can require a lot of resource support. Airport authorities typically will enter into agreements with other entities like the city fire department, the city police department, in case of a major event, and they would respond. But also, the airport authority can enter into on-call contracts. And so we have some on-call contracts that are conducted at the airport, like snow removal for the airfield snow removal. Those on-call contracts are utilized very commonly by airport authorities to make sure that resources are available once they become an airport authority and no longer have the reach back to the local governments.
another follow-up. I mean, I guess I see advantages and I haven't really seen disadvantages, but that's why we have studies too, to understand them further. And, I'm a stepped one may be fine. I have a certain level of confidence too that probably be fine going all the way too. But maybe a weird question, but if it's are most airports within city limits? I mean, ours is, and does that change anything if we have an authority that's within city limits?
It doesn't really change anything. All airports fall within some government, some level of government. Many are in counties. If you look at Bozeman's airport as an example, it's out in the county. It's not in Bozeman. But within a city limit, within a county, that doesn't really matter for an airport authority because they become an independent entity once they become an airport authority. And whether they're single jurisdictional or multi-jurisdictional, where they lie geographically doesn't really matter.
Thank you, Director Roach.
Thank you, Councilor Abshalter and Councilor Kennedy.
I'm more looking forward to setting you up with a board of 11 people so you can be as efficient and effective as city council operates.
Remember that minimum number I gave you?
Right.
The smaller, the better.
Yeah.
13, 15?
Yeah, somewhere in there. That'd be great. No, in reality, I'm with Councilwoman Owen and Councilman Gulick. I would do this tomorrow. I don't think we need to slow step this process. If we're going to do it, let's have a full conversation and start moving the ball. And I would certainly be in support of that. My question for you is, what are we going to do with Rusty? What are we going to do with transit? And I don't know. That's the part that I don't know enough to know whether just setting up an airport authority is the proper move or to have the conversation about a full port authority. My inclination would be to set up an airport authority and then let Rusty deal with Rusty after your divorce, and then we figure out how to do that. But I don't know enough. So what are your initial thoughts, or have you thought about that?
I have, and I think that should be included in the scope of work when we look at an authority, is whether we are single mode or multimodal. And the reason I say that is because transit and the airport are very unique beasts. We're being enterprise fund operations. We're not operated like a lot of other departments within the city. Single authority or single modal authorities work very well. So I would say that either way, there are benefits to both.
I was going to turn to Councilmember Kennedy, but that's probably on a different topic. Did you want to hit this?
I can do that after.
Okay, Councilmember Kennedy.
I'm glad you said that because I think we need to study it all together and be able to decide if it would be better to go forward all at once or we do one step and then the other step. I have to say, many years ago, we established the health authority and a health district to take city county health out of the county and into a health district, which encompasses not just Yellowstone County, but it also extends to other counties. It also, what it did is gave the powers to be in the health community that the city county health department to be able to run it and expand it and go after the dollars that are there for an entity unto itself. I think an airport authority and what I've seen that they did in Helena, what they've done in Bozeman and Missoula quite a few years ago, did their expansion and everything, was the opportunities to expand and to be able to offer the customers and their commercial customers the opportunities at their place. So I think it's a win-win for the city of Billings. I think the big thing on the docket right now is having enough parking. If you had an authority, I think that parking situation may not have been an issue right now because it could have been addressed. And I just think that looking around the country and looking at around the state, the airport authority, and if we do a full transit authority, would be the best way to go. And I'd like to get started as quick as we could with a consultant.
You bring up the ability to expand, and that is one of the significant benefits of including transit within an authority is the ability to go outside of the city limits to serve areas that currently are not accessible. There are other options like the transit district, but
We talked about that a few years ago when we talked about transit and how do you get the bus service over to Lockwood? How do you go outside of our the city limits and either through the MPO or an authority to be able to do it? And it was we weren't able to do a lot with it, but an authority would give you that opportunity to offer more opportunities to people, especially in this community and the surrounding communities. Thank you.
Very good. I moved away from Councilor Esplater, who wanted to follow up on the transit issue, and Chris and Councilor Shaw and Councilor Tidswell. No, okay, Councilor Shaw and Councilor Neese. Thank you.
my only follow-up to that was you had made mention about multi-jurisdictional port authority. If we did include transit with that, would that force us into this multi-jurisdictional port authority, or as it's currently constituted, would that keep us singularly within the city, or would we now be pulling the county into that conversation, which is a whole different kettle of fish? It would not force you to become multi-jurisdictional. You would be multimodal, but you wouldn't have to include the county. Again, some of the benefits of expanding to the county are, as I mentioned, political and potential financial benefits that you could generate, but you don't have to. And I would also clarify that the Montana statute is very silent about including transit within an authority. It doesn't preclude it, but it doesn't specifically lay out how that might happen. And that would be a part of what the consultant would be brought on board to help us with.
Rusty?
Add something real quick, just informational for the council and a quick reminder. In the adopted Unified Planning Work Program this year, we do have a funding, sustainability, and governance study that we will be doing. We're actually planning on letting that RFP here in the next couple days. So through that process, we're hoping to answer more of these questions surrounding what a transportation authority could potentially look like, and then provide kind of a basis for that conversation within this airport authority discussion. So we'll have developed hopefully some of the answers to those questions within that specific study that Transit's doing to give the larger consultant question something to go off of.
Very good. Thank you. Chris, Councilor Shaw?
So I would think, I don't even know really the right questions necessarily to ask, but what I haven't heard is what goals we're trying to accomplish. I mean, my gut is this is absolutely worthy and probably the right thing to do, but I honestly, we've not had an internal discussion, and I've not had a discussion or heard from many of you, which I think would help Jeff and I as to what is it that we're trying to accomplish. The economic side is something that comes to my mind as critically important. Which sets this airport up 10, 20, 50 years down the road to be a stronger economic driver in our community? Which setup helps that? But again, that's not been a discussion I've heard at all over the past 6 or 7 years.
Good observation, Councilor Shaw.
Thank you. I think I can respond to that. I feel like for myself, this and transit are both departments that rely so heavily on federal funding. That's just a whole different animal than what we deal with in general in terms of our city budget. And so I guess one of the goals that I would see is getting some people that have oversight over the airport and potentially transit that really want to deep dive into that world. I don't personally want to deep dive into FAA regulations but I'm sure there are people in our community that would and that would be really good at it. So I think that would be one of the goals that I would see trying to achieve with this. I was going to try and just speed things along a little bit and say I'm definitely inclined to say go forward with getting us more information from, engaging a consultant, moving forward on that process. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, obviously, but we can't get answers to those questions without stepping into the process. So I guess I would make a motion to direct staff to move ahead with this.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you add any specificity to what moving ahead with this?
I think Jeff has outlined it exactly. He's got a potential maximum budget and really needs to go out for a scope with a consultant to see. And so I guess would we say to bring that potentially back to even a smaller group of us to look at the scope of that to make sure we're going to get answers to all the questions that council will inevitably have. And then potentially, as long as that we give it 2 thumbs up, move forward with an RFP for that work.
Something in that $1 million neighborhood.
I mean, it seems like a lot of money
to
to me,
exceed.
but I'm willing to. It's not general fund money; it's airport money. I'm willing to give you quite a long lead on that to see if it actually costs that to get us the information we'd need to make a good sound decision.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. It's made and seconded. I'm going to ask Councilmember Bernice, since I'd recognized it before, you can either go in a different direction or, and I'm going to allow that, but because you were caught by surprise probably by the motion, but
Yeah, I
comment
was.
as you want.
Thank you. And if council allows, because I know there's a motion on the table, but I was going in a completely different direction. Because I actually it was very good in learning. I mean, that's what I was expecting to hear was, what is this about? Because I didn't know much about it and I've learned a little bit tonight about it. But what I didn't hear from you tonight is, what are the taxpayers doing? We heard about, well, it's more efficient. Basically, you mean you don't have to deal with the city council. You can have a smaller group of people is what you're talking about efficiency. As far as leadership, being nimble, being able to go change to market conditions because you just deal with a small group of 5. And that, as I've been on the council for quite a while now, is usually when the airport things come to city council, they just go through really quick. And so I guess my question to you is the city council being inefficient to you as the airport director? Are we holding you up? Has the city council held the airport back from innovation and change and things like that in the past?
I would say that I have not experienced any holding back. Again, these are general benefits that I've listed for each type of governance model. But I would say that it falls down to the ability of an airport to focus on airport business and not have the greater impacts of the government entity to be a part of that overall discussion. It's not a negative. It's really a positive in that as you become an airport authority, the airport is larger, has some very specific needs that must be met with the ability to do business-to-business relationships, with the ability to respond quickly to changes and innovations within the industry. Those are really where you see the benefits. I have not experienced it, but I'm not going to say that others have not in the past and may in the future.
Okay, so a couple things that really threw some alarms off when you mentioned that the authority can go out and assess mill levies. I'm assuming that's voter-approved mill levies?
Yes, it is. That is one of the things that is specifically listed in as an authority can be given that ability. Doesn't mean it has to be. That is just one example of something that's listed in Montana statute.
Okay, so
eminent domain is another.
Right.
It's whether or not the local entity that forms the authority gives the authority
They
that
say they need
structure.
more land to expand the airport, they can take over that land. Okay. And so politically wise, that's going to be a lot easier for them to do it versus this body. I can see that. And then, so how much direct funding of local taxpayer goes into the airport?
None.
None. Okay. And so the potential could be that the authority could then assess a mill levy for the whole county to, or whatever the area is, to then start paying additional taxes for this authority to operate.
That would be something that the local government would have to give the authority the ability to do that.
So we could, if
The
we
authority.
set up the authority, we could not allow that taxing authority.
Right.
Okay.
That would not, you can just not include it in the establishment of the authority.
Okay. All right, and so how about because we brought in the Met, how much in taxpayers' funds are going to the Met every
The
year?
Met gets 10 mil.
10 mils every year. Okay,
Yep.
so this would, if it was going to expand to a county and start having busing out to Lockwood, as was mentioned, it wouldn't be a city entity anymore, it'd be a county or authority of county. So it would potentially have additional taxes to fund all these additional expanded services.
If it was made multi-jurisdictional and the county was included,
We would have to give them, that county and city would have to give them that authority to do something like that. Okay. Yeah, I've learned a lot tonight, but I don't think, I would not be, oh, I'm sorry, one other thing. You talked about the opportunities to be more pay for performance, and then it's the airport fees. So what's it gonna cost the average city passenger to get on there? Do you see fees are gonna be more expensive for those passengers, to get on? I mean, we talked about spending $1 million for the study as airport funds, but where did those funds come from? They're taxpayer funds somewhere, or were they actually generated by the airport to, by, agreements within maybe it's the whatever organizations are there to bring that money into the airport?
we are only allowed to collect a $4.50 passenger facility charge from a passenger. All the other revenue that we generate is generated through commercial activity. And that is very broad at the airport. Commercial activity includes fuel sales. We get a percentage of fuel sales. Concessions, things like buying things at the gift shop, rental cars, parking. So becoming an airport authority doesn't determine whether you're going to pay more or less. It's how the airport authority is operated that determines whether passenger is going to have more or less cost associated with things that they may or may not want to utilize at the airport.
So the cost of the airport authority doesn't impact any of the fees that passengers pay.
Not passengers specifically, to get on an airplane and fly. It might result in a concession percentage going up, so we would get a greater percentage of a food and beverage purchase. As
Okay,
an
so the
example.
cost of the ancillary services there may be more expensive, and then that fee would go to the airport to fund it, and then people would pay more for their Coke or hamburger.
Yes, but again, it's not necessarily just because it's an airport. Government-owned and operated airports and airport authorities, one is not cheaper than the other when it comes to costs associated with commercial activity at the airport.
Okay, well, that's helpful to know. It eases my mind a little bit about the process, so thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Ripsis, Councilor Owen, and we'll try to move to a vote soon. It's getting late.
Mayor, I just wanted to speak to my second because I don't think I got that chance.
You didn't? Go ahead. Feel free.
I'll be very quick, Tom. The city administrator, the reason I'm supporting this motion, the city administrator asked a question and I just want to answer it very clearly. I want us to be the best airport in the state. I want us to be the biggest airport in the state. I want you to spend 0% of your time attending internal meetings, 0% of your time preparing for council meetings. I want you 100% focused on the best airport, the most affordable airport, the most flights in the state. I do not want us to be fourth anymore. And if any part of this frees up even 1% of your time to be more laser focused on being the best airport in the state, please let us do that for you. So that is what I want to accomplish. Period, full stop. I want us to be number one. Please, as you go into this consultant process, assuming this passes, don't swing small. No base hits. Let's be the number one airport in the state again, please.
Thank you very much, Councilor Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. And Jeff, thanks. We've talked about this a couple times. So I appreciate that this is kind of coming forward now. And I, of course, will support the motion to move forward with the engagement. I think though that Chris raises a good point is we better have some goals laid out. And as much as I think we should be the #1 airport in the state, I haven't ever heard anything from you or our previous airport director that says we're doing anything that's preventing that from happening, right? So um, unless we've totally been, left out, I don't know that this switch is what's going to enable that. So I think those goals, that we should be thinking more specifically before we get this consultant engaged on what those goals really are. Otherwise, we'll spend $1 million and just get a nice study and get all the paperwork done and all that kind of stuff. But what are we really accomplishing? So again, if there was anything that we were doing, and I think we've asked about this a couple times, that was preventing us from being there, I would have hoped you would have brought that up. I haven't heard anything like that. Let's get some real goals. I think it is about being an economic driver. I do think if there's anything that the airlines are looking at Billings and saying, well, this isn't the right model for us because they're government controlled versus authority controlled. I haven't heard any of that, but addressing those kinds of concerns, I think would be good. If there are goals that you mentioned, tighter business to business integration, tighter integration between the airport authority and the business community, if those things can be enabled better through some type of, I'd be interested in what those are, because we've never heard of them, right? As much as I think philosophically we like the idea of having that airport authority and taking that off the city books, we've never really heard any kind of roadblocks that we're putting in the way. So I really don't think that this is too much of an inconvenience for you coming here into this meeting. We don't have to hear this very often, but it
Not at
does
all.
happen sometimes. And I think our goals are bigger than that. So I'm not so sure I'm naturally inclined to view Met Transit as part of this process. If I had my druthers, I'd probably just say, let's focus on the airport first and deal with Met Transit later. But I'm open to, you know, decent arguments, that I'm wrong. I think, I'm open to that. To me, I feel like we've got enough opportunity here in the city to really maximize our transit opportunities that I'm not sure about why that integration with making it a port authority is important. So if budget becomes an issue as you get this consultant engaged, I'd prefer to focus on the airport rather than the Met Transit, and we'll leave Met Transit for another. But that being said, I'm all for and supporting where we're going now.
Thank you, Councilor Ripsis. I'll just comment. Usually when you make change, you're making change to solve a problem. And I just want to echo what I've heard before, which is we haven't heard problems. Doesn't mean they don't exist. Doesn't mean that we can't move to something better. But I'm suspicious, and I don't believe in just change for change's sake. I'll vote for this because it's airport money and there's a lot of momentum, and I can see the general description of potential good things. They make sense. But things that make sense need data, they need backup. And so I would still strongly encourage, as part of this process, to try to define what the problem is and also clearly what the benefit is, and do that up front and think about a bifurcated consulting process that wouldn't just commit $1 million. I mean, $1 million is a lot of money, and it creates expectations and momentum that then impair the judgment process because we spent so much money. We've got to move ahead. So that's a dangerous world to be in. So I think there are some real benefits. For example, having a different pay structure. You live in a different world, and you're now confined by existing pay structures and other department heads and the city administrator, and that's a false measure in what's really a national economy for top talent, and that's one of the benefits I would see, and maybe one of the current problems that we need to be explicit about going forward. So I'll vote for it, but I would make those cautionary recommendations, I guess. My gut also is that Met becomes a separate department. As long as there's not competition for dollars, we need to make sure there would not be, we're not setting ourselves up for competition for those, especially federal dollars. Are we ready to vote, Council Member Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I do appreciate all the information. I think there could be some merit to this. I'm not sold on this at all. I know this is probably going to pass and we're going to see something. I definitely am not in support of the Met moving along with this. If at all, it would just be the airport authority. I am really concerned that whatever's being voted on here is we're going to see a contract coming to on consent agenda for $1 million without any additional information, more details. And so I'm not going to support this motion. I don't think it's specific enough as far as what we're looking for as a council. I don't think we've directed staff in which way to go the right way and come to a consensus on everything, because I hear some people saying they want just the airport, other people want to throw the Met in there. I think there's just too much there. I should probably come back to another work session to kind of hammer some of that stuff out before we move forward. But so I'm not going to support this motion unless there's some way we can narrow this down further. Thank you.
Very good.
I want to clarify the motion.
Councilmember Shaw?
Yeah, just to say, the motion is not to have $1 million contract come back on a on an agenda, but Jeff working with Chris and involving council members somehow that makes sense in determining the scope. That's really the next step. And then at that point, it might come back to us on. But I would like to see some council involvement in defining the scope.
Mayor,
Councilor Rowan, I just want to make sure that that clarification of the motion is consistent with your second. So, okay, Councilmember Neese?
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification, and I hope that they work with the committee up at the airport, because I understand they didn't even know about this meeting until tonight or so. So they didn't even know this discussion was going to happen. So we've got an appointed committee up there, and they weren't informed of that. So I would say, if anyone, those people up there should know what's going on at the airport and be informed of this as well. But again, I'm not going to support this, but I look forward to coming back maybe on a work session that we can talk more about it.
Okay, very good. Council, if we're ready to vote, is the motion sufficiently clear? Authorizing staff to take whatever the next step is to define the scope of a possible RFP in the future. Okay, if in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay.
Nay.
Councilmember Neese voting in opposition, everybody else voting in favor. So that motion will proceed, except that we never had an opportunity for public comment before we had our vote. I apologize for that. I don't want to, well, it looks a little bad, but did anybody want to comment on that? I do want to give you that opportunity. We don't have many members of the public left. So, okay, no public comment on that item. That concludes then item number 6, legislative update. Chris, is that yours?
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mayor. I was just thinking about the motion that you just took and that kind of next step. So could you ask the question again?
Yeah, no, just since that concludes our the numbered items, legislative update is the next item up.
Yep. So a couple critical things. Obviously, we've got, the main 4 buckets of this legislative session, and they've remained the case. Safety. That for the most part is going well. I mean, we've got there's generally good bipartisan support around issues with criminal justice system and safety. Land use, that's a whole nother animal, of which is been pretty broad. The area there that I think has been most gaining our attention is kind of really, frankly, mandates or standards being set by the state of Montana. Once upon a time, it was all about single-family detached housing, and now the state is really getting into dictating nothing less than quads or tries. So that I don't want you to leave the impression when I go to these next 2 subjects that those first 2 aren't important, because they are. But the next 2 issues, are hitting us potentially in the 7 and 8 figure categories. So both really dealing with taxation. I mean, that would be really the 3rd bucket, and I'll save the best, or the one we've spent the most time on, for last. But before I step there, this Senate Bill 539 that I referenced in the weekly last week was introduced last week, passed last week, and moved out of the Senate and over to the House. So an example of something that can happen very quickly, and that's why you didn't hear about it earlier. But we're fairly confident that it will have significant impacts on the street assessment system. Now, that's not unique to Billings. In fact, certainly the larger towns, I can't speak for the smaller ones, but I think all of the mid-size and larger cities have had street assessment systems primarily, if not totally, funding their local transportation system outside of gas tax and federal and state with a local street assessment. But this 539, as we interpret it, and again, recognize it's just been days, is formulas of moving it away from an assessment and over to a tax affects who pays. So in our community, right, we have hundreds of nonprofit organizations, blessed, serve our community in many, all wonderful ways, and a couple of hospitals that most people wouldn't think of as necessarily being nonprofit. But you move them off of the assessment role, then you've got to, if you're going to generate the same amount of revenue to invest in the transportation system, that's generally speaking going to mean an increase to the rest. So that's a concern. And then moving into requiring a vote of the public in order to determine whether you can have that system move forward or not. So nothing to be afraid of as far as I'm generally concerned. If it's worthy and necessary, then it's our jobs every day to prove to the public why and how we spend their money is worth their consideration. But I'm not going to pretend that that doesn't come at a significant cost and effort to go out there and go through that process. So that's on the street assessment front. We're not as certain about the storm water utility. It is a utility. There is a straight argument there. I think a good argument, but not absolute clarity as to whether the stormwater utility in its assessment of equivalent, what ERUs is our measurement, would that pass the test to remain a different system or fall into this, thus requiring it to be voted on by the public and requiring it to come off of the nonprofit side of the equation. So just some very significant impacts potentially to funding the transportation system and the stormwater system. So we'll work it hard. We're not by ourselves. All of the League of Cities, I mean, it's a significant issue for all cities and towns. So that's there. The biggest issue we've obviously been dealing with for the last month, and will continue to, ties to House Bills 231, 155, and I apologize, I can't remember. There's a third bill that was introduced here just in the past few weeks. They all seek to lower the value of a mill, which on the one hand, there's general strong support across the entire state of Montana, including you and in this city, to reduce the burden on property owners, in particular homeowners. But they all, because of our mill cap, as you know, in our charter and with Sunburst, would cause us the lowest $6.5 million hit, the highest I think is $20 million in the last one. So we have been working first, I would say at the committee level, the legislative committee level, and please chime in the committee itself, but they voted on very specific kind of prioritization of how to tackle this issue. That happened, I want to say, days before the mayor and I and Finance Director Zeller went to Helena. We pitched those ideas, and candidly, one of them got a fair amount of traction, but ones that didn't get traction were some of that committee's preferred methods, like why not have the state entitlement share just get boosted up in order to cover that gap? Well, the committee said that was their top priority. We got we had no takers in our conversations in Helena to that concept. So I just don't want you to think that this language you have in front of you was ignoring that committee's work. But the bottom line is what you have in pink, and then I just gave the mayor, in fairness, some work he's done to try to help as well. We're trying to get language that would drop into any of the three bills, or a fourth one if it got created tomorrow morning. And worked internally. We waited for the state of Montana to give us some proposed language from those conversations in Helena. They did that last week. We then asked Dorsey Whitney, who often advises cities and the state of Montana in the past, would very regularly guide them in stuff like this. Hey, could you guys kind of weigh in on this for us? And they did that. And so here's where we stand, frankly, today, where we don't have it perfected yet. House Bill, I'll stop after this. House Bill 155 was heard Friday morning on the Senate side, or close to noon by the time they got to the hearing. Chair Hertz indicated after that hearing that it's his intent that later this week they would take executive action on 155. They all continue to voice, including during that hearing, receptiveness to some amendment that would resolve the kind of charter Billings sunburst issue. But nobody, to my knowledge, is aware of a fix that will not likely cause in some kind of litigation thereafter. But at least out of the state of Montana, they seem to be very willing to take a position that they, we're creatures of the state. They have a constitution. That constitution gives them certain power and authority, and they are willing to at least discuss exerting that power over our home rule charter. I'll leave it at that. I think I'm not asking tonight, don't think it would be appropriate handing it out to expect that you're going to take some kind of action, but we do need to keep this thing moving. I would expect Wednesday, when we have our legislative committee meeting at the latest, that we get them squarely on board and keep us moving forward with this.
Chris, you mind if I
No, please do.
hand out what I distributed
Yep.
on Friday? So just a little bit of background. Jarrett Coles is the bill drafter in Helena, who works closely with Lou Jones, who is the primary author of House Bill 231, the governor's homestead bill. He generated some Billings language, we'll call it, that is largely reflected in here, especially the first couple sections which lay out background, which normally you might say, well, that doesn't matter, sort of background. In this case, is very important because it aims to set out the legal basis for the state's ability to impact our charter, and also just the policy goals to be gained from consistency. And the general approach is to make Billings and Sunburst fall under 1510-420, which is the statute that creates a revenue cap for other cities of half the rate of inflation plus new growth. So Dorsey and Whitney took that, changed the language at the end, and that's what you have in pink. On Friday, I sent some recommended changes to that introductory background stuff, which I think is, again, still important. I'm not saying that what I'm going to pass out is by any means perfect, but it just tries to beef up why are we doing this, because that would be very important for people in Helena, but also courts and also our voters. So I'm just going to ask you to take one again. I agree with Chris. We don't want to, at 9 o'clock, start getting into this, but just want you to have a copy of it so that you can look at that. Okay, that's that. What else on legislative issues here? Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we should talk about this and make some decisions here, because what I keep hearing from constituents now is that the city is working with this legislator to overturn our charter and remove our cap. And so I think, as was discussed in legislative committee, and we can maybe talk about this as a council, is one of the things we didn't want to do and recommend or accept from the legislator was that the state legislator would override our city charter, the city of Billings. And so I think that we need to, as a council, decide, do we want the state to take the action of this, of removing our charter cap and forcing forcing our residents to go under a different section of the law, which may be similar to, I think Andy said it may have been pretty close to where it was as far as the amount of revenue. But do we want to support the legislator and, just erasing parts of our charter? I, for one, don't. And I would like to make sure we send that message to the state legislator. If they do that, the city council doesn't support that. Because I think that that's really important that the voters are aware that it is the state legislator overriding what the city council is choosing to do. I don't think that we should be participating in writing language for the state legislator. That is colluding with the legislator to overturn our charter. That's my opinion. I'd like to hear from others.
Councilmember Neese, I'm just going to ask you the question. What's the alternative? What's your alternative?
I think we've expressed our alternatives, but we haven't discussed it with the council. But I think the alternative is if the legislator, I think there has been other amendments to try to get them to pause this. I think the alternative was to have, well, if you're going to do this, that's great for the self-governing organizations, but then you have to have a two-tier system in the DOR as far as doing their assessments and things like that. I don't know how that went when you talked to them. I'm sure the DOR doesn't want to have that two-tier system. But there's also the ability to give the city some time to say, well, let's take it to the voters, find out, try to explain to them what it can be done, or readjust our charter cap and let the voters readjust the charter cap to a cap that's going to be more compatible with this new tax structure. So there's a lot of different things we can be talking and assessing, but in essence, if there's nothing's done, that's true. We lose 6.5. That's a new number, 20 million that I've heard. That we as a city council is going to have to deal with the state legislators have actually done to the city of Billings, largest city in the state. So, but I think as a council, we should not be participating and telling them we want our charter overturned.
Okay. Further discussion, Councilor Shaw?
Yeah, I would say, to be clear, this is not the city's idea or suggestion. I mean, it is in the sense of we're trying to amend some bills that would have really drastic consequences for our citizens and our city. And if this is the issue, if this is the one that's gotten traction, we can't force them to put amendments in other bills or to do what it is that we would necessarily want or vote as a committee or vote as a council. I think if this council says as a body, we don't support this, the message we're sending to the legislature is pass your bills, but do nothing for Billings. And then we are going to be facing a major funding cliff in the city. So I look at it as it may not be perfect in that it may not be everyone's number one first choice, but it is where we're at, and it's this or nothing.
Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. I would probably agree with this. I with both of you, actually. I don't like this at all. I don't want to support it. But I do think that you're right, that we might have to just, swallow the worst or the best of bad options. What I would say, though, is that this has to be factual. And it's not factual right now in that everybody around the state was complaining about property taxes increases after this last appraisal. It wasn't just Billings. And I don't think ours were terribly out of whack with what everybody else experienced. So the floating mill concept itself does not mitigate property tax increases. What caused those was the shift of the burden because residential property tax or property values increase much faster than commercial. And so if we're going to put something in there and with the idea that maybe it should survive some lawsuits, we better be factual about what we're putting in there. And the rest of the state may not want to hear it, but I think we have the data that shows that we've done a better job holding the line than other cities have that are under the floating mill concept. So if we're going to swallow this, let's at least not, let everybody else say that we're in this position because we were overspending where they were being responsible. So let's make sure the language in no way implies that. And the way I read this right now, it says we had a bad system and everybody else had the good system. And so we're going to go this way. When in reality, if the actual goal was the whole increase is down, we'd be sending the rest of the state over towards a fixed mill concept. Now we had a weird situation where we had both the water lawsuit and the sunsetting of PD1 that both happened in the same year. So yes, we did. Water bills reimbursement, but those were just flukes and would not normally happen. As well as this large increase doesn't normally happen. In the real world, the floating mill concept is not the panacea for property tax increases, and we shouldn't apply that in this legislation.
Councilor Rowan.
I agree with a whole awful lot of what Councilmember Rups just said. I think I don't know what the conversations are up there, but I don't think Billings's facts are being understood accurately. I think we have been very circumspect in comparison to the other large cities in terms of property taxes. I think this is a really, really bad idea. And I would love to be able to answer the mayor's question of what's the alternative, but I haven't been involved in any of the discussions yet. So maybe Wednesday at Budget Committee, we could just have a little bit of time on this and talk about what the Budget Committee's thoughts are on this. And I feel like we're being, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, I feel like we're being a little cavalier here about the voter will on the mill cap. Under the Montana Constitution, we all know this very well, every 10 years we revisit our local government structure. I know very few people in this community who are satisfied with the current structure of the local government. Too big of a council, they want one member, one ward, whatever. No one will have that discussion because they are so fearful of this. And now we're just running up there and backdooring it. And I really think that's a problem. This is something the city of Billings, the voters here hold very dear to. It is part of the character of the community, especially for people who have been here since the charter was written, established. I mean, this is something the city cares a lot about, and I think for us to go up and champion in any way, running right around the backs of the voters is a really bad idea. I don't have an answer to the mayor's question. I don't know what the entitlement share offer was. Did we ask for a permanent entitlement share increase or a temporary one? There's all sorts of things I don't know to be able to answer the mayor's question. And I know we're under the gun here, but I feel compelled to speak up for how important, agree with it or disagree with it. Mill cap is important to the people of Billings, and they have said so at every local government review since the mid-90s. They do not want to put it at risk to even talk about it because it's that important. So.
Okay, very good. I don't think we're going to get resolutions tonight, so I will try to wrap up if that's, and then to be come to the Legislative Affairs Committee meeting. Councilmember Chris, City Administrator Kukulski.
Can't disagree with anything that's being said. I just want to remind, at least it is my impression, yes, this would provide the opportunity for this body to raise mills higher than the charter. That doesn't mean this body, I don't think anything in this language says you will. I think it is you may. Now, I get it opens the door to where it's not, I mean, 15, 10, 420. I've been in Montana since 99. The council has, to my knowledge, has never been forced to raise its mills or prevented from lowering its mills. That the raise is capped. The lowering is not. So just if something like this were to pass, I think you would have an option. If something doesn't pass, at least where they stand right now, the only options will be to take the financial hit and do it a different way. So, sorry.
Okay, very good. Anything else essential on this point, just because the hour's getting late? I don't want to cut off anything critical.
Chris, what you're saying is, if it is passed like this, we either take the 6.5 hit anyway, or we violate the charter. And so the idea of us, of even putting this in there, giving us the opportunity to violate the charter in being okay with the state is the wrong move for the voters. And so I know I won't support any language, and I don't think the city and I don't think the mayor should be going to the state legislators talking that this could be a possible solution. I think that is, as a private citizen, if you want to do that, I think as a council, we have not made a decision whether to approve or not. The closest thing has come to this is the legislative committee has talked about it and has indicated their path forward. And it was discussed that this is one thing we don't want to do.
And Councilmember Neese, I just have to correct the record, so to speak. At the Legislative Affairs Committee you were at, that was correct. At the following one that you were not at, the tone changed dramatically just because of lack of options. So, yeah.
And that, I guess that's what I would ask as the last comment I would make, is it's obviously this is super critical. So I and the staff do not want to be working in some direction that the majority of this body thinks is wrong. So I would say a vote, a position will need to be taken officially of some sort yesterday. I mean, as soon as possible, because this is moving, and then the impression is that everything may sit around for.
The city's mill cap, or remove the city's mill cap.
Okay. So the motion, as I understood it, would direct staff, since that's what we're confined to here, I guess, to not introduce or not work on language that would have the effect of removing completely, or even giving the option to remove completely, going to Chris's point, or vary from the mill cap in our charter.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Is there a second? At this stage, I'm not hearing a second.
Okay.
That's to say that people disagree with you necessarily
That's
at
right.
this stage.
So
But
Mayor, then let me do it this way so that we can get people on the record, is I make a motion, because I won't support this motion, but I can make the motion and not support it and not speak against it. They make a motion that the staff move forward with the language similar to this that would override the city charter.
so that motion flipped. It's to give positive direction. Positive direction to give a green light in that direction. Okay, is there a second to that? Council, okay, okay, so second, Councilmember Aspenlighter. Further discussion? Councilmember Owen.
I'm just going to speak. I generally am in alignment with Councilmember Neese where he is, but I don't have enough information. I don't sit on the legislative committee. So half of this council can have a conversation that I cannot have today. I would just ask that we hold this vote until after there's been a ledge committee or a budget committee. I mean, give the rest of us a chance to get up to speed, recognizing that the city administrator is 100% right. This decision should have been made yesterday. I just simply am not prepared to make it right now.
Okay, further discussion on the motion, which is in the affirmative green light. My only comment is I sympathize with that. I kind of agree with that. But at some point we may need to have a special meeting. It all depends on the timing. We just don't know exactly, what's happening. So that's a difficult situation. Councilmember Shaw.
Yes, I'll make a substitute motion to do exactly what Councilmember Owen just said, which is let's hold off on this vote until the half of council that doesn't participate in the committee has time to be brought up to speed. Come to the legislative committee this Wednesday if you can at 4 p.m., where we will obviously be talking about this, get more information, Then let's have a discussion when everyone is well informed.
Okay, I'm not sure the effect of that, but it would just, yeah, it would eliminate, yeah,
Postpone
yeah,
the
yeah.
It postponed.
Withdraw motions and replace it.
Yeah.
It-
I'll withdraw my second.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, then the Nice motion dies, okay? Okay, I shall have to give an opportunity, is there somebody who would like to second Councilmember Nice's motion? Now that, wait, I'm sorry, it was
I went
withdrawn.
ahead and withdrew my
Okay,
motion.
all right, so that's the plan.
But
Stay
this
tuned.
is something that needs to be
This has actually been
decided soon, like this week, because they're going to be voting on this week. And if we're still working on language that's supporting it, that they're going to think that we support it, and we don't. I know I don't.
Okay. And I would make a distinction between dealing with legislators and dealing with Dorsey and Whitney. Our internal, I think there's value in any event to continue to work with our drafter at Dorsey and Whitney. So,
I disagree with that.
but okay. All right. Thank you for that discussion. Very valuable, just to bring people up to speed, have this discussion. I think that was time well spent. So anything else on the legislative update, Chris? Don't see anything. Highlight upcoming agenda items of council interest. Chris, do you have any future agenda items you want to call our attention to?
No.
Okay, council discussion. Councilmember Gulick.
Thank you. I'll try to be very fast, but I am requesting that we not use the parliamentary procedure of tabling for routine use in the future. I understand it's a procedure that's widely used in the legislature, but as an expedient, I mean, they have thousands of bills that come before them, but I think it unnecessarily shuts down debate. You know, in the case of the draft pedestrian and bike plan, you know, we had somewhere in the order of 100,000 or more, I'm sure, dollars in consultant fees that were spent on it, hundreds of staff hours that were spent on it, dozens of hours by community members, including Councilmember Shaw. There was no reasons given for tabling it. You know, there may have been some very valid reasons for you not wanting to see it be adopted, but we didn't have a chance to even make those changes to the plan or anything. Where we didn't, wasn't curiosity from the staff why they thought that was better than the 2017 plan. So I think citizens of Billings deserve better. I think in terms of public policy, we should have discussion and debate. And so I would ask that we not use the tabling. You know, there is a reason that it exists as a tool, but for routine use, I don't think we met it. So
Okay, thank you. You've made your point. There's nothing before us to decide on that, but thank you for making your point on that. Anything else in the council discussion? Don't see any. Is there public comment on things not on our agenda items tonight, Public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any public comment on something not on our agenda? Council discussion, we'll go back to that. Go ahead.
I will go back and review what was in there and confirm, make sure that we've got on our website whatever it directed. Yeah, I just can't answer the question if it's there. I assume it is there, but I will verify.
Okay. Thank you. And there was no public comment on non-agenda items, so we'll close that, and that means we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.